Bang! The Wuxia divine sword flashed with a blood-red light and slashed at the head of the magma dragon. Rumble! A thunder-like explosion rang out. Roar! The flame dragon roared in pain. On its head, a deep sword mark started from its head and extended all the way to its tail, as if it was going to cut the flame dragon in half. Under this strike, the magma dragon formed by divine power and the laws of yin and yang shrunk by half, and its divine power was obliterated. Bang! The huge ice peak that was heading toward Jian Wushuang was crushed by Jian Wushuang's foot. Jian Wushuang's sword and kick had broken the two killing moves of Yin Yang Divine Lord. This kid! When Yin Yang Divine Lord saw this, his pupils shrank and his expression turned ugly. This scene fell into the eyes of many rulers of the fifth city who had come from all directions to watch the battle. They stopped in their tracks and their bodies trembled. There's actually someone fighting with the Divine Lord. Isn't this the person that Sir Divine Lord put a bounty on? This person is so strong. He's only a fifth stage great ruler, but he's able to fight Yin Yang Divine Lords at the same time without being at a disadvantage. They all looked up at Jian Wushuang and their breathing became rapid. Yin Yang Divine Lords, that's all you've got. Where did you get the confidence to ask me to kill myself? You dare to say you want me to be your slave? Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold as he looked at Yin Yang Divine Lord and Yin Yang Divine Lord. When the Yin Divine Lord and the Yang Divine Lord heard this, their faces turned extremely gloomy. They looked at each other, and the hot-tempered Yang Divine Lord immediately said, "Blood sword, don't be so smug." After saying that, Yin Divine Lord's expression turned serious again. Yang Divine Lord, don't hold back. Be careful not to fail miserably. Although the Yang Divine Lord had a violent temper, he was not a brainless person. He nodded and said in a deep voice, "Yin Divine Lord, then let's use that move to suppress this kid." "All right," he said. Yin Divine Lord nodded. Immediately, Yin Divine Lord's aura rose sharply. The two nomological powers, one Yin and one Yang, rose up and intertwined in the air, gradually merging together. The principles of Yin and Yang that the two of them had comprehended were from the same source and complemented each other. At this moment, they were able to merge together without any obstruction. After the two principles merged together, they gradually practiced and turned into a yin-yang array diagram that swept across the world. This yin-yang array pattern covered the sky and ground, and its terrifying power crushed all the qi movement like a millstone that could destroy the world. "Oh!" Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and a hint of surprise appeared on his face. It was no wonder that even though both Ruler Bone Armor and Yin-Yang Divine Lord were servants of that important figure in the back city, Ruler Bone Armor had been assigned to the first city. The difference in strength between the two was too great. "Blood sword, go to hell!" At the next moment, the Yin-Yang Divine Lord shouted at the same time. In an instant, the Yin-Yang formation map pressed down on Jian Wushuang with a mighty power that could destroy a star. This is the trump card of Yin-Yang Divine Lord. Yin-Yang Divine Lord, you are indeed an expert from the back city. You are much stronger than us. For a moment, the powerhouses of the fifth city who had come from all directions to watch shook their heads and exclaimed, "Blood sword, hold on." As for Ruler Hao Jin, he stared at this scene fixedly. He did not even dare to breathe loudly, and his heart was in his throat. In the void, Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold and his black hair was flying. He looked at the huge yin-yang array diagram that was like a sun that was coming toward him. He took a deep breath and said, "Star!" Bang! In an instant, the surging wind, the floating dust, everything in the air turned into the purest energy and rushed toward Jian Wushuang's hand. Not only that, but the rulers and experts standing in the distance also seemed to be drawn to Jian Wushuang's hands. It was so grand that it covered the sky and the sun. In the end, all of it was poured into Jian Wushuang's hand and turned into a silver sword rainbow that was 1,000 feet long. Jian Wushuang had comprehended this sword move when he fought Ninth Kulpa King in the Divine Life Palace's trial arena. After Jian Wushuang broke through to the 5th level of Ultimate Ruler, he had reached the realm of great completion. This sword was enough to destroy a star. This sword was enough to split the Milky Way. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang held the 1,000-foot sword rainbow in his hand. His black hair flew in the air and the divine light in his eyes suddenly grew 3 inches. Slash! Boom! Immediately, the silver sword rainbow slashed down. This sword directly created a sky-shaking wave, and the sky seemed to be split in half by this sword. Bang! In an instant, the 300-meter-long silver sword rainbow fiercely collided with the yin-yang sword pattern. Like a knife cutting through tofu, the yin-yang array diagram was split 5,000 feet. Like a chaotic night being torn apart by lightning, the yin-yang sword pattern was instantly shattered. This sword was as destructive as rotten wood and destroyed everything. It was extremely overbearing. What? In an instant, Yin Divine Lord and Yang Divine Lord's bodies trembled violently. The shock and anger in their eyes turned into fear. As for the silver sword rainbow, after it split the yin-yang formation, it only paused for a moment before it slashed toward Yin-Yang Divine Lord again. Run! Seeing this, Yin-Yang Divine Lord's eyes were filled with anger, and he turned around to escape. Can you escape? Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. Holding the silver sword rainbow, he looked like a god. Innate divine power. Original universe. Jian Wushuang said coldly. In an instant, an invisible domain descended on the entire place, and Yin Divine Lord and Yang Divine Lord's footsteps slowed down. The silver sword rainbow finally slashed down. How dare you, thief? My master is the heavenly snake playboy. Yin-Yang Divine Lord was horrified and divine power surged in his body in an attempt to resist. However, in the face of absolute power, everything was useless. The violent Yang Divine Lord's divine body was covered in cracks like shattered glass under the sword. Immediately after, Yang Divine Lord's divine body collapsed in an instant, and countless divine powers were crushed into powder by the silver sword rainbow. When Yin Divine Lord saw this, his face turned ashen and pale. Boom! Then, the silver sword rainbow that had killed the Yang Divine Lord fell on the Yin Divine Lord again. Yin Divine Lord's divine body started to disintegrate at a speed visible to the naked eye. Countless divine powers were obliterated. I'm done for. Yin Divine Lord heaved a long sigh and gave up struggling. Just as all the divine power in his body was about to be completely crushed and his life was hanging by a thread. Suddenly, that silver sword rainbow actually quickly dissipated. What's going on? Yin Divine Lord's face was filled with joy. He thought that someone had saved his life. He quickly looked up. However, Jian Wushuang withdrew the Wuxia divine sword and looked at him expressionlessly. Blood sword? What do you mean by this? Yin Divine Lord asked, but his tone was less aggressive and provocative. Although he did not know why Jian Wushuang had spared his life at the last moment, he was glad to have survived Jian Wushuang's attack. At that moment, he did not dare to provoke Jian Wushuang again. Jian Wushuang stood in the void with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, I'll keep your life for now. Go back and tell the heavenly snake playboy behind you to wait for me. I'll come to you in person soon. Hearing this, Yin Divine Lord's pupils shrank. Blood sword? You're really not going to kill me? Said Yin Divine Lord in disbelief. I'll only let you live for a few days. I'll give you a chance to be buried with your master. Jian Wushuang replied indifferently. When Yin Divine Lord heard this, he was overjoyed. Ha ha ha! Blood sword. You asked for this. All right, blood sword. Let's wait and see. Yin Divine Lord did not dare to say anything as he was afraid that if he said something wrong, he would anger Jian Wushuang and cause him to change his mind. After saying that, Yin Divine Lord turned around and fled into the distance in a sorry state. Jian Wushuang shook his head nonchalantly. To him, Yin Divine Lord was just an ant that he could kill with a flip of his hand. If he wanted to kill him, he could do it at any time. It was Heavenly Snake Playboy who was behind this that Jian Wushuang really wanted to kill. In the distance, Blood Sword. Ruler Hao Jin was so excited that his entire body was trembling. He looked at Jian Wushuang with a fanatical gaze. He won. The Blood Sword actually won. Yin Yang Divine Lord was a well-known ultimate ruler in the ruler realm. Before he was subdued by Heavenly Snake Playboy, he was one of the top figures in the universe ruler realm. Even ruler Hao Jin had heard of Yin Yang Divine Lord before he stepped onto the ancient starry sky path. However, the two of them had been defeated by the Blood Sword, and the Yang Divine Lord had died immediately. If the Blood Sword had not taken the initiative to stop in the end, Yin Divine Lord would have died there, and there would be no more Yin Yang Divine Lord in the world. Strong. He was too strong. The Blood Sword's strength is definitely enough to compete with the top geniuses on the ancient path of stars. There was a glint in ruler Hao Jin's eyes. At that moment, he was completely convinced by Jian Wushuang. He made up his mind that no matter what they encountered on the ancient path of stars in the future, he would follow Jian Wushuang closely. Such a powerful yet gentle and humble backer was simply hard to come by in 10,000 years. He had to hold her tightly. In the void, Jian Wushuang lowered his head and smiled at ruler Hao Jin. Then, under the reverent gazes of the rulers of the fifth city, he walked down from the sky. At this moment, he had retracted all of his divine power, but it was as if he was stepping on a stairway to heaven with every step he took. His entire body seemed to be lifted up by the heaven and earth. He was dressed in a simple black robe, and his aura was only that of a fifth-stage ruler. Everyone present was at a higher level than him. However, at this moment, everyone raised their heads to look at him. No one dared to show any presumptuous expression on their faces. Jian Wushuang took a step forward and glanced at ruler Hao Jin. He said indifferently, "This matter is over, let's go." "Yes." Ruler Hao Jin rubbed his face and agreed excitedly. Then he flew over and followed Jian Wushuang. Seeing Jian Wushuang walking over, the crowd automatically made way for him in silence. Their expressions were complicated. In the beginning, they had thought that Jian Wushuang was a soft persimmon that they could squeeze as they pleased because of the 1,000,000 universe origin stones that Yin Yang Divine Lord had offered. Therefore, when Jian Wushuang stepped into the fifth city, they did not bother to hide the greed in their eyes. However, in less than a day, this person, who they had looked down on in the beginning, had become an existence that they could not even look up to. The black armored guards who had captured Jian Wushuang were also among the crowd. They had escaped because they had been guarding the gate of the mansion of the governor and had not been killed by Jian Wushuang. At this moment, their hearts were filled with extreme fear. Fortunately, he had not offended Jian Wushuang in any way, except for his cold attitude. The crowd automatically opened up a path for Jian Wushuang to pass through. Among these people, there was no lack of people who had secretly informed Yin Yang Divine Lord when he had first arrived in the fifth city. However, at this moment, they all lowered their heads respectfully and did not dare to look into Jian Wushuang's eyes. Finally, Jian Wushuang stepped on the steps of the passage gate of the fifth city. The sixth city was right behind them, just as Jian Wushuang was halfway through the passage door. "We're waiting, farewell, Lord Bloodsword. We're waiting, farewell, Lord Bloodsword." In the crowd, a person first whispered words of respect, and then more and more people began to shout, "Lord Bloodsword, we will see you off." Finally, the words "Lord Bloodsword" resounded throughout the fifth city and soared into the sky. The strong should be respected. No matter where it was, this was a matter of course. Jian Wushuang had won the greatest respect with his own strength. Jian Wushuang did not stop walking and disappeared into the passage door. The onlookers looked at the passage door where Jian Wushuang was no longer there. Inexplicably, they all had a sudden realization. From now on, the ancient path of stars would probably become lively because of the blood sword. There were even more people who sighed in their hearts. "Last night, I entered the mortal world, and no one knew me. From today onwards, I'm the Lord of Heaven." Whoosh! After passing through a dark passage, Jian Wushuang's field of vision suddenly brightened. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang and ruler Hao Jin appeared at the exit of the sixth city's passageway. "Blood Sword, this is the sixth city. This place can no longer be called a city. The space within it is much wider than the first 5 cities. We usually call this place the sixth secret realm, the Grotto Heaven world." Ruler Hao Jin explained. Jian Wushuang nodded. He immediately released his divine power and discovered that the vastness of this place was far beyond the range of his senses. His divine power, which could cover the stars, could only cover a corner of this place. Indeed, this place should not be called a city anymore. It would be more appropriate to call it a heavenly passage world. The 18 cities on the ancient path of stars could be said to be 18 small worlds. The further one walked, the wider the area of the small world and the denser the law aura. Jian Wushuang could not help but sigh. What kind of great power did that lord have to be able to open up such a stunning ancient starry sky road? And this was only the ancient path of stars for the ruler realm. The starry sky ancient path of the ruler realm was probably even more vast and mysterious than this place. This kind of heaven-defying means is simply unimaginable. Jian Wushuang exclaimed in his heart. He somewhat understood why the ruler Bloodwave had told him that if he did not become a supreme, he would not even be qualified to know the identity of that lord. This made Jian Wushuang look forward to it. If he could really stand out on the ancient path of stars and get an invitation to the universe banquet of all races, he would be able to meet that lord there. Jian Wushuang and ruler Hao Jin walked casually in the sixth secret realm. Perhaps it was because the area had become vast, but the cultivators here were not as dense as those in the first 5 cities. After walking for a long time, they might see a ruler realm expert who was walking in a hurry. When the ruler experts saw Jian Wushuang, they were extremely surprised, as if they had seen a rare treasure. It's rare to see a 5th-stage great ruler in the 6th city. The ruler realm experts sized up Jian Wushuang and left after clicking their tongues. Jian Wushuang frowned. He knew that he was a 5th-level ruler and would be too conspicuous in the 6th city, where the top ultimate rulers gathered. He simply waved his sleeves and used a secret technique to block his cultivation fluctuations. Under this secret technique, only a super expert like the ultimate ruler would be able to see Jian Wushuang's cultivation. After covering his aura, Jian Wushuang nodded in satisfaction. Then Jian Wushuang and ruler Hao Jin chatted as they moved forward. They were not in a hurry. Lord Bloodsword, I didn't expect that I, Hao Jin, would be able to step into the 6th city one day. Ruler Hao Jin could not help but sigh as he looked at the rapidly retreating mountains beneath his feet and sensed the rich aura of the 6th city's principles. Once upon a time, he was just an insignificant character in the 3rd city. Anyone could step on his head. If he had not met Jian Wushuang by chance, he would have lost his life in the hands of others. He had never thought that he would one day step into the 6th city. Hao Jin, the 6th city is only the beginning. Our steps are far from just the 6th city. Jian Wushuang smiled. Ha ha ha, Lord Bloodsword, to tell you the truth, when I first saw you, I knew that you would become a dragon among men, a great figure on the ancient path of stars. Ruler Hao Jin laughed loudly. Is that so? Jian Wushuang smiled noncommittally. Just as the two of them were chatting and walking forward, suddenly, help! A crisp cry suddenly came from the distance. Jian Wushuang and ruler Hao Jin looked over and frowned. He saw a purple-clothed young woman rushing over with a panicked expression. Behind this young woman were 5 burly ultimate rulers, who were topless and wearing iron armors. They were chasing after her with cold smiles on their faces. Holy Maiden Joshi, stop now. Give up your futile struggle. One of the 5 ultimate rulers laughed coldly. As these words fell, the distance between the two quickly closed. The woman in purple, who was called Holy Maiden Joshi, was struggling with her words. She looked around anxiously. Then, she noticed Jian Wushuang and ruler Hao Jin in the distance. She gritted her teeth, changed her direction, and dashed toward Jian Wushuang and the other man. I'm the Holy Maiden of Joshi Holy Land. I'm being chased by evil people. I hope you can help me. I'll be grateful in the future. Holy Maiden Joshi shouted anxiously. Joshi Holy Land? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. He had heard of Joshi Holy Land before. It was also a big power in the universe, but its strength was not at the top. It would be an exaggeration to say that it was a holy land. Lord Bloodsword, should we help? Ruler Hao Jin asked. Help? Why? Just because she's the Holy Maiden Joshi. Jian Wushuang shook his head and spoke indifferently. The various forces on the ancient road of stars were complicated. Although Jian Wushuang was not afraid, he did not want to get involved in the muddy water for no reason. After saying that, Jian Wushuang turned around and planned to move forward in another direction. A flash of despair appeared in Saint Joshi's eyes. The 5 armored men, who were closely watching this scene, immediately laughed and said, "Kid, you're tactful." After saying that, the 5 armored men looked at Holy Maiden Joshi again and sneered, "Holy Maiden Joshi, don't try to play tricks and expect others to save you. I can tell you clearly that no one in the top 10 cities would dare to save you, let alone the 6th city. After all, you're the person Heavenly Snake Playboy has ordered to be arrested." Hearing that, Joshi's body trembled and her face turned pale. "All right, I'll go with you." The Holy Maiden Joshi stopped and said dejectedly. She knew that she could not escape. "That's right. Joshi Holy Land, you should know that it's your good fortune to be chosen by Mr. Heavenly Snake. Many people want to be favored by him, but he doesn't even care. Holy Maiden Joshi, don't blame us. We're just helping Heavenly Snake. We're counting on you to put in a good word for us in front of Heavenly Snake after you become his cultivation partner." The 5 armored ultimate rulers all smiled. With that, the 5 of them rushed to Holy Maiden Joshi and were about to take her away. "Wait!" At this moment, an indifferent voice suddenly came from the distance. "What?" The 5 ultimate rulers turned to look, their eyes narrowing. "That kid? Didn't he leave?" The person who had spoken was naturally Jian Wushuang. "Did you just say Heavenly Snake Playboy?" Jian Wushuang approached step by step and said expressionlessly, "How audacious! How can you call the name of Heavenly Snake Playboy?" One of the 5 men in armor shouted. "Shut up!" The leader of the group, the burly man in iron armor, waved his hand to stop the man from speaking. He turned to look at Jian Wushuang and said in a deep voice, "Sir, since you know who the Heavenly Snake Playboy is, you should also know that he never allows others to interfere in his matters. Are you going to interfere in his affairs now? Have you thought about the consequences?" The burly man's tone was calm, and the more he spoke, the heavier his tone became. It was full of oppression. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang said with a faint smile, "Are you using Heavenly Snake Playboy to pressure me now?" The leader of the group replied expressionlessly, "Sir, I'm not trying to pressure you with my words. I just hope that you can think about the implications of this. As far as I know, no one who dares to meddle in Playboy's affairs is still alive." "Oh? Is that so?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and then his tone suddenly became cold. He laughed in a low voice. "I'm sorry, but I don't like to care about the consequences, especially about Heavenly Snake Playboy." The next moment, the Wuxia divine sword in Jian Wushuang's hand was suddenly unsheathed. A sharp blood-red sword light shot up into the sky. Split open the sky. Clang. The sword light instantly slashed toward the 5 ultimate rulers. "Impudent! Audacious!" The 5 armored men's expressions changed drastically as they shouted. Then, the 5 of them used their superpowers at the same time to block Jian Wushuang's sword. Bang! A huge explosion sounded, and the ground began to shake. A moment later, the sword light gradually dissipated. The 5 armored men were turned into dust under this sword without a trace. A single sword strike had killed all 5 of the final rulers. The sky gradually became clear again. The sword essence that belonged to Jian Wushuang turned into divine power and disappeared in the void. The place where the 5 armored men had been standing had turned into nothingness. Under Jian Wushuang's sword, the 5 of them were crushed into ashes before they could even scream. You killed them?" Holy Maiden Joshi covered her mouth and asked in disbelief with widened eyes. Jian Wushuang looked at her indifferently and replied, "What? I can't kill them. No, I just wanted you to help me stop them. I didn't want you to kill them," the Holy Maiden Joshi said in a daze. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang could not help but smile. "Holy Maiden Joshi, do you think I killed them to help you?" Jian Wushuang did not wait for her reply. He looked at ruler Hao Jin and said, "What are you still doing there? Let's go." Then Jian Wushuang walked away slowly. He had killed the 5 ultimate rulers only because they were Heavenly Snake Playboy subordinates. It had nothing to do with Holy Maiden Joshi. Since the 5 people were dead, Jian Wushuang naturally didn't want to have anything to do with Holy Maiden Joshi. "All right," Ruler Hao Jin responded loudly, then quickly waved his hand at Holy Maiden Joshi. He chuckled, "Goodbye, Holy Maiden Joshi." After saying that, he quickly followed Jian Wushuang and walked away. Holy Maiden Joshi stood there in a daze. When Jian Wushuang and Ruler Hao Jin were about to disappear from her sight, she shivered and shouted, "Your Excellency, please wait for me." After saying that, she quickly chased after Jian Wushuang. After a while, she came to Jian Wushuang's side. "Holy Maiden Joshi, is there anything else?" Jian Wushuang frowned and asked indifferently. "Your Excellency, may I know how to address you?" Joshi asked after taking a deep breath. "Blood sword." Jian Wushuang opened his mouth and spat out 2 words. The Holy Maiden Joshi nodded and said seriously, "Sir Blood Sword, do you know that you've caused a great disaster?" "Oh, a great disaster." Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and replied with a faint smile, "Why do you say that?" Hearing that, Joshi's expression turned serious. She took a deep breath and said, "The 5 people who chased me were the rulers under Heavenly Snake Playboy. I see that you have some enmity with him, Sir Blood Sword." "I guess so," Jian Wushuang replied casually. Joshi nodded and continued, "Your Excellency Blood Sword, do you know about Heavenly Snake Playboy?" Hearing this, Jian Wushuang could not help but raise his eyebrows. Speaking of Heavenly Snake Playboy, he only knew his name, but he did not know the specific information. "I'd like to hear the details," Jian Wushuang said calmly. The Holy Maiden Joshi nodded and said slowly, "Heavenly Snake Playboy is the current young clan leader of the Heavenly Snake Clan in the universe. Not only does he have the support of the Heavenly Snake Clan, but his own combat strength is also extremely powerful. He can be said to be invincible among rulers. He came to the ancient road of stars 8,000 years ago. When he first arrived, he went through 10 cities and entered the last 8 cities. He fought with the top geniuses of the universe and caused a sensation. It was said that if he had not been too arrogant and domineering in the last 8 cities, which made a monstrous Heaven's Pride expert unhappy and drove him out of the last 8 cities, he would not be in the top 10 cities now. However, although he had been driven out of the back 8 cities in terms of combat power, he was definitely at the top of the ruler level and could not be underestimated. And now, among the top 10 cities except for Lord Lon who guards the 10th city, Heavenly Snake Playboy was the most respected. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang nodded. He was not surprised to hear that Heavenly Snake Playboy's battle strength was comparable to an unrivaled ruler. After a pause, Jian Wushuang asked indifferently, "In that case, why don't you just follow Heavenly Snake Playboy? As far as I know, the Heavenly Snake Clan is a big clan in the universe, and their strength is no worse than your Joshi Holy Land." Hearing that, Joshi's eyes were filled with fear. She said hurriedly, "That's because you haven't seen Heavenly Snake Playboy and don't know how abnormal he is." "What?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and his eyes were filled with curiosity. "Sir Blood Sword, do you know Saintess Xianxia?" the Joshi Holy Land asked. "I know a little." Jian Wushuang nodded. Saintess Xianxia was the current saintess of another holy land. In terms of strength, that holy land was a bit stronger than the Joshi Holy Land. "Then do you know? After Saintess Xianxia was captured by Heavenly Snake Playboy, her whole body was sucked dry. All the divine power in his body was taken away by Heavenly Snake Playboy. Even now, the Holy Land where Saintess Xianxia is located still has a deep blood feud with the Heavenly Snake Tribe." Joshi's tone became extremely frightened as she spoke. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and nodded to show that he understood. Joshi panted slightly. After a while, she calmed down and said seriously, "Blood Sword, Heavenly Snake Playboy is a vengeful man. You killed his men, so he will not let you go. Therefore, I advise you to quickly withdraw from the ancient path of stars. Don't let your emotions get the better of you and endanger your life." Joshi looked at Jian Wushuang sincerely. These words came from the bottom of her heart. Jian Wushuang had saved her life, and she really did not want to see Jian Wushuang lose his life in vain. You don't have to worry about that, Jian Wushuang replied with a faint smile. Joshi thought Jian Wushuang did not believe her, so she said seriously, Blood Sword, I wasn't exaggerating at all. In fact, Heavenly Snake Playboy's strength is even more terrifying than what I said. Before she could finish, someone suddenly patted her shoulder. She turned her head in confusion. Ruler Hao Jin glanced at her, then shook his head and chuckled. Holy Maiden Joshi, I think you're wrong. It's not Heavenly Snake Playboy who is going to let Lord Bloodsword go, but Lord Bloodsword who is not willing to let him go. Do you understand? After that, the two of them ignored her and continued to walk forward. This, Holy Maiden Joshi was stunned. She looked at the backs of the two people and suddenly felt that there seemed to be layers of fog on these two people, extremely mysterious. Forget it. Forget it. He saved my life after all. I can't just watch him die. Joshi gritted his teeth and followed closely. At the same time, in the 8th city there was a grand hall. There was no light inside, and it looked extremely gloomy. At this moment, the tightly shut door was slowly pushed open, and a trace of light gradually spread in through the crack in the door. Then he saw Divine Lord walking in with his back bent and his heart trembling in fear. Master! After stepping into the hall, he quickly knelt down on the floor with a plop. Then, he put his hands on the ground and moved his knees inch by inch as he walked in. In the deepest part of the hall, there was a blood-red chair. A devilish young man with long black hair draped over his back, wearing a long robe that dragged the floor, slowly opened his eyes. His face was hidden in the darkness, and a hoarse voice came from his throat. Slave, what about the blood sword's head? Divine Lord, who had an awe-inspiring presence in the 5th city, was now like a quail with its head lowered. He trembled and buried his head in the ground as he said, Master, the blood sword is too powerful. The young Divine Lord and I are no match for it. In the depths of the darkness of the hall, there was a moment of silence. Then, the hoarse voice sounded again. What about Yang Slave? Master, the young Divine Lord was killed by the blood sword in one strike. Divine Lord replied respectfully. Oh? If he's dead, how did you come back alive? The devilish young man asked without any emotions in his voice. Master, the blood sword asked me to pass on a message to you. That's why I came back alive. Divine Lord replied. Give me a word? The demonic youth exclaimed in surprise, and then the corners of his mouth curled up. What did he say? Hearing that, Lord did not dare to say what Jian Wushuang had said. He hesitated for a long time before he gritted his teeth and said quickly, The blood sword, he told you to wait for him here, and it won't be long before he comes to visit me personally and lets me be buried with you. After he finished speaking, Divine Lord did not even dare to breathe loudly. His head that was buried in the ground lowered even more. As for the devilish young man, he was silent for a moment before he burst out laughing. Ha ha ha! Interesting, very interesting. He actually asked me to wait for him at the city? And that you'd be buried with me? This laughter was extremely terrifying. The entire hall shook violently because of this unbridled laughter. The evil-looking young man laughed so hard that tears were rolling down his face. He wiped his eyes and looked at Divine Lord, who was kneeling on the ground. Slave, you really listened to him. Hearing this, Lord Yin's heart turned cold and he quickly said, Master, you've misunderstood. Without waiting for him to finish, the devilish young man stuck out his scarlet tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. He laughed eerily and said, Slave, you are so obedient to him. How do you think I should reward you? In an instant, Divine Lord felt a chill run up his spine and up his head. Only he knew how terrifying the reward that the devilish young man had mentioned was. Master, please spare me. Master, please spare me this time. I don't want to die. Divine Lord cried out in fear. Boom, boom, boom. He raised his head and kept kowtowing to beg for mercy, making loud banging sounds on the floor. Dead? I won't. I'm just sending you to a beautiful place. The devilish young man laughed slyly. The next moment, a huge snake tail suddenly shot out from the darkness. Bang! The snake's tail wrapped around Divine Lord's body and pulled him back into the darkness. Ah! In the hall, Divine Lord's shrill cry could be heard. After a while, the hall quieted down, leaving only the hissing sound of a poisonous snake. It was extremely eerie. In the deepest part of the hall, the evil-looking young man opened his mouth and bit deeply into Lord Yin's neck with his two fangs. Countless divine power flowed through the two fangs of the evil-looking young man and into his body. Divine Lord could no longer make a sound. His body was trembling and his legs were shaking on the ground. He could only stare at the evil young man with a frightened look. His face gradually turned from green to white and then to gray. Gradually, there was no more movement from Lord Yin. "You're all useless." He opened his mouth and stuck out his forked tongue, licking the corner of his mouth. He shook his head and the snake tail that was wrapped around Divine Lord slowly loosened. Bang! Divine Lord's corpse fell to the ground. His eyes were wide open as if he had seen something extremely terrifying before he died. The evil-looking young man ignored him and stood up from his seat. He walked into the darkness and arrived at the entrance of the palace. His eyes shrank slightly under the light. They were golden snake-like vertical pupils. Behind him was a long snake tail covered in pitch-black scales. He was Heavenly Snake Playboy. Blood Sword? Interesting, really interesting. I'm looking forward to the moment I see you more and more. Heavenly Snake Playboy chuckled in a low voice, and his voice was extremely cold. When the time comes, how should I reward you? The Sixth City. Jian Wushuang, ruler Hao Jin, and Holy Maiden Joshi had already reached the central area of the Sixth City. A majestic city appeared beneath their feet. Sir Bloodsword, this is the center of the Sixth City. Most of the supreme rulers of the Sixth City are gathered here. The Holy Maiden Joshi introduced. Jian Wushuang nodded and said, "Yes, go in." As they entered the city, the number of ultimate rulers instantly increased. One ultimate ruler after another hurriedly brushed past the three. "Junior Sister Joshi, are you all right?" At this moment, a surprised voice suddenly came from the distance. Then, they saw a group of young men and women in purple clothes, who were dressed the same as Holy Maiden Joshi, flying toward them. "Who are they?" Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. "Sir Bloodsword, they are people from the same holy land as me." When Holy Maiden Joshi saw them, she smiled and waved at them. A moment later, the group of young men and women walked over. The one who had shouted earlier was a young man with an imposing appearance and a face as clear as jade. "Sir Bloodsword, this is eldest martial brother Lang. He is also the leader of the Joshi Holy Land's expedition to the ancient Path of Stars. Senior brother Kwang Yi." The Holy Maiden Joshi introduced them one by one with a smile. Jian Wushuang nodded at them as a greeting. "Junior Sister Joshi, this is?" Senior brother Lang looked at Jian Wushuang and asked in confusion. "Senior brother, this is Sir Bloodsword. His strength is unfathomable. It was because of him that I was able to escape the pursuit of the armored guards under Heavenly Snake Playboy." The Holy Maiden Joshi introduced with a smile. "It's like this? Then I'll have to properly thank Sir Bloodsword." Lang looked at Jian Wushuang and cupped his hands with a smile. "Your Excellency Bloodsword, thank you for saving Junior Sister Joshi. Otherwise, if she had fallen into the hands of Heavenly Snake Playboy, the consequences would have been unimaginable." "You're too polite." Jian Wushuang glanced at him and replied indifferently. "You're too kind. If you were able to save Junior Sister Joshi from the iron-skirted ruler, you must be very strong. Sir Bloodsword, you must be a prodigy from some holy land or divine kingdom, right?" Lang's heart skipped a beat, and then he asked with a smile. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and replied indifferently, "Ruler Lang thinks too highly of me. I'm just a nameless nobody who doesn't deserve the title of chosen." Lang's chin was raised a little. He smiled and said, "You're too humble, sir." Then, he turned over his right hand and an interspatial ring appeared. He handed it to Jian Wushuang and said, "Your Excellency." There are 100,000 universe origin stones in this interspatial ring. As a senior brother, I'm here to thank you on behalf of junior sister Joshi. Jian Wushuang looked at him indifferently. After a long time, he shook his head and said, "No need. Saving Holy Maiden Joshi was just something I did in passing." This? Lang glanced at Jian Wushuang and no longer insisted. He put away the interspatial ring. After a few more words of courtesy, Holy Maiden Joshi stood beside Jian Wushuang and said with a smile, "Bloodsword, do you have a place to go now?" Jian Wushuang shook his head and replied frankly, "Not at the moment. Bloodsword, why don't you come with us?" Holy Maiden Joshi replied with a smile, "I can tell you more about Heavenly Snake Playboy along the way." Jian Wushuang pondered for a moment and then nodded. "All right," he said. "Sir Bloodsword, junior sister Joshi, this isn't the place to talk. Let's talk as we walk. I also have some things I want to ask you." Lang laughed and interrupted. "Eldest senior brother, what's the matter?" The Holy Maiden Joshi asked in confusion. "Come here, I'll tell you slowly." Lang looked at Jian Wushuang, then turned to Holy Maiden Joshi and said, "All right," he said. Joshi walked into the crowd where Lang and the others were. The two sides continued to move forward, one in front and one behind. Jian Wushuang and Ruler Hao Jin fell behind. Ruler Hao Jin looked at the back of Lang and the others and muttered unhappily, "Lord Bloodsword, the people from the Joshi Holy Land are too stingy. You saved the life of their Holy Land saintess, yet you want to pay them off with 100,000 universe origin stones? This isn't even enough to pay for the usage fee of the Cosmos Passage." Jian Wushuang smiled but did not reply. "Humph!" Ruler Hao Jin snorted coldly. "Lord Bloodsword, look at them. They're intentionally keeping a distance from us. It's as if they're afraid of being with us. All right, stop talking. Saving Holy Maiden Joshi was just an act of convenience." Jian Wushuang patted Ruler Hao Jin's shoulder and said indifferently. Ruler Hao Jin nodded and said no more. However, he still looked at the backs of Lang and the others with a disgruntled expression. Not far ahead. "Junior sister Joshi, do you know the origin of that bloodsword? You're actually hanging out with him." Lang's face, which had been full of smiles, immediately sank and said. Holy Maiden Joshi was stunned. She raised her eyebrows and asked, "Eldest senior brother, what do you mean by this? What's the word mixed?" Lang saw that Holy Maiden Joshi's face did not look good, and said slowly, "Junior sister Joshi, I'm just worried that you'll be used by bad people. Think about it, you don't even know the origin of the blood sword, and it's such a person who doesn't know the origin that offended Heavenly Snake Playboy for you, a stranger. Do you think it's possible?" As soon as he finished speaking, the other Joshi disciples echoed, "Yes. I've never heard of this blood sword." Senior brother just asked him where he came from, but he refused to say. "I think he must have some ulterior motives." "Humph, junior sister Jui, in my opinion, this blood sword is either using you to get close to the Joshi Holy Land to build a relationship, or he is simply one of Heavenly Snake Playboy's men, and is just acting in front of you." Holy Maiden Joshi's eyes turned cold. She glanced at them and said, "Do you guys know what you're talking about? That blood sword saved my life. Junior sister, don't be so agitated. Everyone is only saying this out of worry." Lang comforted her and then said, "How about this? Tell us how the blood sword saved you." Holy Maiden Joshi took a deep breath and nodded slowly. Then, she told him how Jian Wushuang had saved her. "What? That blood sword actually killed 5 of the iron-skirted rulers. It's over, it's over. He's completely offended Heavenly Snake Playboy this time. He won't let this matter rest. Sai, we were thinking of going to Heavenly Snake Playboy to apologize to him and settle this matter. But now it seems that it's impossible to settle this. That blood sword is really a big threat. Not only did it offend the Heavenly Snake Playboy, but it also dragged us into this. Now, the Heavenly Snake Playboy will definitely not let us off. Yes, what should we do now? Heavenly Snake Playboy will definitely come to find trouble with us." The Joshi Holy Land disciples sighed. Holy Maiden Joshi was slightly stunned. She looked at her senior brothers who were usually full of pride and confidence. She could not believe it. She had thought that after she finished speaking, these senior brothers would forget about Jian Wushuang and even join forces with him to fight against Heavenly Snake Playboy. She did not expect that her senior brothers were so afraid of Heavenly Snake Playboy that their first reaction was to think that Jian Wushuang had implicated them when they heard that she was being chased by a ruler under Heavenly Snake Playboy and then saved by Jian Wushuang. How absurd was this? Gradually, the disbelief in her eyes turned into a strong sense of unfamiliarity and disappointment. Ruler Lang's expression had been ugly to begin with, but he sharply caught Joshi's expression. His eyes flickered as he glared at the disciples behind him. What are you all saying? That blood sword saved the holy maiden Joshi, which is a great favor to the Joshi Holy Land. Why do you blame him? After he finished speaking, the Saint Land disciples immediately shrank back in fear. However, there was still a hint of resentment in their eyes. Eldest apprentice brother, the blood sword only needed to drive the 5 iron-skirted rulers away. Why did you kill them? Now, we've completely fallen out with Heavenly Snake Playboy. When Heavenly Snake Playboy is really angry, Blood Sword can just leave without a word. No one knows him anyway. But what should we do? Why should the people killed by the Blood Sword be blamed on us? The disciple called Kuang Yi muttered. Shut up! Ruler Lang glared at him, then turned to Holy Maiden Joshi. He let out a sigh and smiled wryly. Junior Sister Jui, don't blame me for being straightforward. Although what junior brother Kuang Yi said was a little harsh, it wasn't without reason. What the Blood Sword did was indeed too reckless. It would have been the best way to negotiate with Heavenly Snake Playboy. After all, no matter how strong Heavenly Snake Playboy is, he has to give face to the Joshi Holy Land, right? Now that we've killed his men, the peace talks are impossible. Hearing this, Holy Miaden Joshi looked at the faces of Lang and Kuang Yi and felt a chill in her heart. So, the senior brothers that she had admired in the past was such a group of people who were afraid of death? Holding on to her last hope, Holy Miaden Joshi took a deep breath and asked, Senior brother, what should we do now? Ruler Lang chuckled. Don't worry, junior sister. I'm not someone who's afraid of trouble. However, Heavenly Snake Lord is very powerful right now. With just the few of us, we're no match for him. Holy Maiden Joshi frowned upon hearing this. Ruler Lang continued to laugh. Junior sister, don't worry. I've already found out that the governor of the 6th city, Divine Lord Tiansong, is preparing to host a banquet tonight to welcome the geniuses and rookies of the 6th city. I happen to be on his invitation list. Later on, I'll bring all of you to attend his banquet. At this point, Lang's face showed a touch of pride, as if it was an extremely proud thing to be invited by a Divine Lord Tiansong. After a pause, he continued, Junior sister, you may not know this, but Divine Lord Tiansong has always been at odds with Heavenly Snake Playboy. In the early years, his clan was almost exterminated by Heavenly Snake Playboy. We might be able to persuade Divine Lord Tiansong at the banquet to fight with us to resist Heavenly Snake Playboy. In this case, no matter how powerful Heavenly Snake Playboy is, he would have some scruples. Hearing this, Holy Maiden Joshi's heart skipped a beat. She naturally knew who Divine Lord Tiansong was. He was a veteran ultimate ruler who had been at the level of an ultimate ruler for more than 10 chaos cycles. His power was unquestionable, and he was definitely an expert among the ultimate rulers. If Divine Lord Tiansong could really help them fight against Heavenly Snake Playboy, they might really have a chance to do so. All right, he said. The Holy Maiden Joshi nodded and said, Senior brother, I'll tell Sir Bloodsword about this. After all, I'm involved in Sir Bloodsword killing the ruler under Heavenly Snake Playboy. I'll have to invite him to attend Divine Lord Tiansong's banquet. This? Lang hesitated for a moment, but he nodded helplessly when he saw Joshi's determined look. All right, as long as the Blood Sword is well behaved and doesn't cause trouble at Divine Lord Tiansong's banquet, it will be fine. Hearing that, Holy Maiden Joshi smiled slightly and did not reply. She turned around and walked toward Jian Wushuang and the other man. Lang looked at Joshi's back as she left. His eyes gradually narrowed, and he snorted. Blood Sword, come with us to Divine Lord Tiansong's banquet later. Joshi walked to Jian Wushuang and said with a sweet smile, "Divine Lord Tiansong? A banquet?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. "Yes, Divine Lord Tiansong is recognized as the #1 person in the 6th city. We might be able to seek his protection and fight against Heavenly Snake Playboy together." The Holy Maiden Joshi smiled. Then Holy Maiden Joshi told Jian Wushuang about Divine Lord Tiansong. After hearing this, Jian Wushuang pondered for a while and shook his head. "I won't be attending Divine Lord Tiansong's banquet. You guys can go on your own. I'll deal with Heavenly Snake Playboy myself." Hearing that, Joshi became anxious and quickly said, "Sir Bloodsword, that Heavenly Snake Playboy is very powerful. We are definitely not his match alone. Only by gathering all our strength can we have a chance to fight him. Junior sister, if Sir Bloodsword doesn't want to go, then don't force him. Perhaps Sir Bloodsword is bold and doesn't need our help." Lang suddenly came over and said with a fake smile, "Senior brother." Hearing this, Joshi was furious. She looked at Lang with fire in her eyes. She had always been a sensitive person. So how could she not see the hidden hostility between Lang and Jian Wushuang? Lang ignored him and looked at Jian Wushuang with a smile, saying, "Sir Bloodsword, am I right?" Jian Wushuang replied calmly, "You're right." After a pause, Jian Wushuang cupped his hands and said calmly, "Ruler Lang, Holy Maiden Joshi, why don't we part ways here?" After saying that, Jian Wushuang did not care whether they agreed or not. He took Ruler Hao Jin and walked into the distance. "Your Excellency Bloodsword." Holy Maiden Joshi was anxious. She was about to chase after him, but Lang stopped her. "Little junior sister, don't forget, you and we are on the same side. That Bloodsword is just an outsider. Why do you care so much about him? And as you can see, I didn't drive him away, he left on his own." Lang's face darkened, and he said in an unfriendly tone. Holy Maiden Joshi ignored him and wanted to catch up with Jian Wushuang, but Lang's big hand held her down and she could not move. After a while, Jian Wushuang's figure gradually disappeared from her sight. Joshi had to give up resisting and looked at Lang coldly. Lang's heart trembled when he saw Holy Maiden Joshi's eyes. He saw unfamiliarity and disappointment in Joshi's eyes. "Junior sister Joshi, let's go. Divine Lord Tiansong's banquet is about to begin." Lang forced a smile on his face and said. Joshi nodded her head and followed Lang. Lang took a deep breath, and his eyes flashed with determination. "Junior sister Joshi, I must let you see that I'm the only person you can rely on in this world. As for the Bloodsword, if he wants to court his own death, then so be it. Originally, in the universe, there was no such thing as day and night. However, because the Lord who opened the ancient path of stars said that there was night and day and the stars changed. That night, the sky of the 6th city was filled with stars. Jian Wushuang was sitting cross-legged in the void with Ruler Hao Jin standing behind him respectfully. "Lord Bloodsword, Divine Lord Tiansong's banquet has begun," Ruler Hao Jin said softly. Jian Wushuang nodded and looked down through the endless nebula. In the center of the vast 6th city, in a magnificent hall, a song and dance filled the air. Many cultivators of the 6th city, as well as geniuses like Lang, were sitting cross-legged, chatting and laughing as they toasted each other. Divine Lord Tiansong's banquet was a grand occasion for the entire 6th city. Basically, all the prominent figures of the 6th city were invited to the banquet. "Lord Bloodsword, with your abilities, it would be easy for you to enter Divine Lord Tiansong's banquet. Are we really not going?" Ruler Hao Jin asked. Jian Wushuang looked away and shook his head. "No need. I just hope that they don't come out and cause trouble when I'm looking for Heavenly Snake Playboy." Then Jian Wushuang stood up and said, "Let's go. It's time for us to meet that Heavenly Snake Playboy." That's true. When Ruler Hao Jin recalled how Jian Wushuang had killed Yang Divine Lord with a single stroke, he could not help but smirk and a confident look appeared on his face. He was now extremely confident in Jian Wushuang's battle strength and no longer had any doubts. That night, in the bustling 6th city, Jian Wushuang and Ruler Hao Jin left the 6th city quietly like lonely passers-by and disappeared into the vast night. 10 days later, Jian Wushuang had killed the city lord of the 7th city, supreme ruler brilliant, in an unrivaled manner, and ascended to the top of the 7th city. 13 days later, Jian Wushuang had entered the 8th city. The 8th city, the heavenly snake divine palace. My lord, the blood sword has entered the 8th city. In the dark hall, a servant hurriedly walked in and kneeled on the ground. Hiss, hiss, hiss. A sound similar to a snake flicking its tongue came from the deepest part of the hall. Then, an evil young man with golden vertical pupils and long black hair draped over his back walked out of the darkness. Tisk, tsk. Tisk, you've really made me wait. Heavenly Snake Playboy twisted his neck, making a cracking sound. He was not afraid of Jian Wushuang's arrival at all. On the contrary, his eyes were filled with curiosity and interest. Where is he now? Heavenly Snake Playboy lowered his head and asked. Sir, the blood sword should have just passed through the gate of the 8th city. The servant replied respectfully. Heavenly Snake Playboy nodded and put his hands behind his back. He looked through the hall and toward the city gate in the distance. In his eyes, rays of golden light flickered. Go and find the blood sword first. Tell him that I'll be waiting for him in the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace in 3 days. Heavenly Snake Playboy said. Yes. Hearing this, the servant decided to leave. At this moment, Heavenly Snake Playboy's faint voice was heard again. Go and inform Mo Luo, Heitang, and the others. 3 days later, we will intercept and kill the blood sword in front of this divine palace. The servant's heart could not help but tremble when he heard this, and he respectfully took his leave. Looking at the back of his servant, Heavenly Snake Playboy stuck out his forked tongue and licked his lips with a cruel look in his eyes. At the city gate of the 8th city, Jian Wushuang and ruler Hao Jin walked slowly. Some of the former ultimate rulers of the 8th city narrowed their eyes when they saw the two of them. They quickly discussed in low voices. I've heard that someone in the first 8 cities killed a ruler under Playboy and said that he would raise the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace to the ground. It seems to be him. This person is the blood sword? Let's go. We need to stay away from him. Is this the person who wants to challenge Playboy? The ignorant are fearless. Blood sword must be a proud son of heaven to be able to come to the 8th city. It's a pity that he shouldn't have challenged Playboy. The ultimate rulers of the 8th city were discussing and sizing up Jian Wushuang and Nangong Wuk. They seemed to be afraid of being associated with Jian Wushuang and quickly kept their distance from him. Lord Bloodsword, it seems that the 8th city doesn't welcome us. Ruler Hao Jin noticed the gazes of the surrounding people, and his lips twitched. Jian Wushuang smiled and replied, Why do we need their welcome? That's true. Ruler Hao Jin nodded, his lips curling up. Then, he opened his eyes wide and glared at the ultimate rulers who were discussing in low voices on the side of the road. He fiercely berated, What are you looking at? Yes, I'm talking about you. You're still looking? Do you think I won't beat you up? Hey, why don't you try looking at another one? The faces of the ultimate rulers by the side of the road immediately turned red with anger. You're looking for death. Just as they were about to flare up, they seemed to have thought of something and sneered. Humph. You've offended Heavenly Snake Playboy anyway. You won't live long. So, the people who came to challenge Playboy are just a bunch of people who are good at talking? Humph. I'll see how you guys die later. They crossed their arms and sneered. Ruler Hao Jin rolled up his sleeves, looking as if he were about to explode. All right, don't put on an act here. Jian Wushuang could not help laughing and patted Ruler Hao Jin's shoulder. Ruler Hao Jin could not help but scratch his head when he heard this. He chuckled and replied, I'm just a fox exploiting the tigers' might to scare them. Who told them to look down on others first? Whoosh! At that moment, a golden light suddenly shot out from the depths of the 8th city. Then, the golden light faded and an old man stood in front of Jian Wushuang. Are you the blood sword? The old man looked down at Jian Wushuang and asked indifferently. It's me. Jian Wushuang stopped smiling and nodded calmly. Blood sword. I'm a servant of the Heavenly Snake Playboy. The Playboy has ordered me to inform you. Before he could finish. You're just a mere servant. Do you think you're worthy of standing on top and talking to me? Jian Wushuang's eyes turned cold and he struck out a finger. Bang! A sharp sword light instantly shot out from Jian Wushuang's fingertips. Blood sword, you! The old man's expression changed. Just as he was about to say something, he saw the sharp sword light coming down on his head. It broke through his defense and pressed on his shoulder. Get down here, Jian Wushuang said in an indifferent voice. The next moment, the old man was directly cut down by the sword and knelt on the ground. Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked down at the old man with his chin. He said indifferently, "Now you're telling me why Heavenly Snake Playboy ordered you to come." The old man's face turned red. He looked up at Jian Wushuang and quickly said, "Blood sword, Playboy ordered me to tell you that he will be waiting for you in the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace in 3 days. 3 days later?" Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up. After a moment of silence, he nodded and said, "All right, then go back and tell your master that the blood sword will come on time 3 days later and raise the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace to the ground." Hearing this, a touch of anger flashed in the old man's eyes. He was scared out of his wits by Jian Wushuang's sword. He did not dare to say anything more. After a cold snort, he hurriedly jumped up from the ground and shot into the distance. After the old man left, Ruler Hao Jin hurriedly said, "Lord Bloodsword." Heavenly Snake Playboy said 3 days later, "I'm afraid there's a trap." Jian Wushuang shook his head and replied, "It's fine." At the same time, he raised his head indifferently and looked at the Lord's residence of the 8th city, where the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace was located. He narrowed his eyes. "Heavenly Snake Playboy, don't let me down. Lord Bloodsword, where are we going now?" Ruler Hao Jin scratched his head. "Let's find a place to rest," Jian Wushuang said. After they left, the 8th city was in an uproar. The news that Heavenly Snake Playboy would challenge Jian Wushuang to a battle in the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace spread like wildfire. 3 days later, Heavenly Snake Playboy challenged Bloodsword to a battle at the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. The Bloodsword has announced that he will come to the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace and raise it to the ground in 3 days. This is the first time someone has challenged Heavenly Snake Playboy since he came to the 8th city. All of a sudden, rumors about the battle between Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy spread everywhere. The words "blood sword" spread across the 8th city at an extremely fast speed, causing a commotion. Then who is the blood sword? What's the origin of the blood sword? Many more people started to guess Jian Wushuang's identity. The night was dark. At the gate of the 8th city, a group of young men and women in purple carefully passed through the passage door and entered the 8th city. Seeing that there was no one outside the passage, the group of young men and women immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Heavenly Snake Playboy is very powerful in the 8th city. Almost everyone in the 8th city is under his command. We should be more careful this time. The young man leading the group of young men and women had an imposing appearance and a face as clear as jade. "Eldest senior brother is right. Senior brother Lang, you're so thoughtful." The group of young men and women in purple nodded in agreement. This group of young men and women were the Joshi Holy Land disciples led by Lang. Holy Maiden Joshi was among them. Her face was blank, and she didn't respond. Lang glanced at her and shook his head. Then he turned to a big man with a beard and asked, "Divine Lord Tiansong, what's our plan to kill Heavenly Snake Playboy?" The bearded man stood with his hands behind his back, and his aura was as majestic as an unmoving mountain. He was the city lord of the 6th city, Divine Lord Tiansong. He had a blood feud with Heavenly Snake Playboy, but he had been holding back because he was weaker than Heavenly Snake Playboy. At the banquet, Lang only told them about his plan to kill Heavenly Snake Playboy. The two sides immediately agreed and came to the 8th city. Divine Lord Tiansong said, "Heavenly Snake Playboy is very powerful. Although we might be able to fight him if we work together, we should still be careful. I suggest that we find out more information first and sneak into the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. Then, we can find a way to kill him when he is unprepared." Ruler Lang instantly nodded in deep understanding. "Junior brother Kuangyi, junior brother Xuanshan." He turned around and ordered, You two sneak into the city and find out more about ruler Heavenly Snake. Yes. Two Joshi Holy Land disciples stepped out from behind and cupped their hands. Ruler Lang turned to look at a mountain outside the city, then said to the others, "Let's go. We'll wait for the news there." A moment later, the group disappeared at the entrance of the passage. A day passed by in the blink of an eye. It was the second last day before the battle between Jian Wushuang and ruler Heavenly Snake. Outside the 8th city on the pitch-black mountain, ruler Evergrace and ruler Mountain Seeker, who had gone out to scout for information, had returned. "Senior brother, something bad has happened. The Blood Sword is openly challenging the Heavenly Snake Playboy. The two of them have agreed to fight in the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace 2 days later." Ruler Vast and Mountain Seeker both hurriedly walked over. "What? That Blood Sword is openly challenging Heavenly Snake Playboy?" Lang's face darkened and he said, "Is this Blood Sword an idiot? Did he think that he could challenge Heavenly Snake Playboy just because he killed a ruler under him? You're so arrogant. Lang, mind your words. Don't insult Sir Blood Sword." The holy maiden Joshi, who had been expressionless, suddenly changed her expression. Lang snorted and did not say anything more. When Divine Lord Tiansong heard that, he could not help but ask, "Lang, who was that Blood Sword?" "Blood Sword? He's just a nobody, not worth mentioning." Lang immediately told them about Jian Wushuang and said with a cold expression, "That Blood Sword is seeking his own death. I can't care about that. I'm just afraid that it will delay our plan. The Blood Sword is going to visit the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. The Heavenly Snake Divine Palace will definitely be on guard. I'm afraid it won't be easy for us to sneak in." When Divine Lord Tiansong heard that, he was first enlightened before he waved his hand and said with a cold smile, "It's okay. We'll let the Blood Sword be the cannon fodder first. After the Blood Sword is killed by Heavenly Snake Playboy, we'll come out from the dark and kill him in one blow." Lang's eyes flickered. "That's a good plan," he said with a cold smile. "Then let's kill the Blood Sword first." Joshi's heart sank when she heard the conversation. 3 days passed by in a flash. In a pavilion, Jian Wushuang sat cross-legged on the ground and his eyes suddenly opened. A light flashed across Jian Wushuang's eyes. "Time's up. We're going to flatten the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace." Jian Wushuang stood up and walked toward the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. Ruler Hao Jin followed behind Jian Wushuang. On this day, the entire 8th city was shaken. Inside the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace, Heavenly Snake Playboy also stood up and stuck out his forked tongue, licking the corner of his mouth. "Blood Sword, it's time to give you a reward." At the end of the Imperial Road in the 8th city, Jian Wushuang stood up and stepped forward. In the beginning, Jian Wushuang's speed was extremely slow. As time passed, Jian Wushuang's footsteps became faster and faster. Finally, he turned into a bolt of lightning between heaven and earth. With a thunderclap under his feet, his body soared into the sky. "Blood Sword, pay your respects to the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace." In the next moment, Jian Wushuang's voice was like rolling thunder falling from the sky. It suddenly exploded in the sky above the 8th city, the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. At this moment, everyone in the 8th city was gathered here, and everyone was watching. "It's starting." Everyone raised their heads and looked at Jian Wushuang, who was standing in the void above the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. They narrowed their eyes at the same time. They knew that the battle between the Blood Sword and Heavenly Snake Playboy had begun. The next moment, more than 20 ultimate rulers in iron skirts rushed out of the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. They held long axes in their hands and wore battle armors. They looked like the legendary divine generals of the Heavenly Court. They took a step forward and stopped Jian Wushuang outside the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. "Blood Sword, Playboy has ordered that if you want to fight him, you'll have to get past us first." The 20 iron-skirted rulers had powerful auras. They were at the ultimate ruler realm, just like the 5 iron-skirted rulers that Jian Wushuang had killed in the 5th city. These are the 28 ironclad guards of Heavenly Snake Playboy. It seems that if the Blood Sword wants to defeat Lord Heavenly Snake, it must first defeat the strength of his subordinates. If that's the case, even if this blood sword can really fight with Heavenly Snake Playboy in the end, I'm afraid he won't have much divine power left. When the crowd saw this scene, they all started discussing. At the back of the crowd, Ruler Lang and Divine Lord Tiansong were also watching the scene. Ruler Lang shook his head and laughed coldly. This blood sword is really stupid. It had to provoke Heavenly Snake Playboy so openly. Look at what happened now. Heavenly Snake Playboy has countless rulers under him. I'd like to see how many of them can the blood sword kill. Lang, Divine Lord Tiansong said. This blood sword is just a brainless man. We don't need to care about him. He paused. Lang, Divine Lord Tiansong said. We'll be ready at any time. As soon as Heavenly Snake Playboy comes out, we'll kill him with one strike. Ruler Lang nodded in response. Outside the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace, Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. Back when he was in the Taro Ruins, he had the power of a fourth-level ruler and defeated the allied forces of Lord Jinan, the third prince, and the ruler Silver Rock. Now that he had reached the fifth level of the ruler realm, his strength had increased several-fold. These 20-some iron-skirted rulers were nothing in his eyes. Fine. I'll cut off your wings, then come back and kill you, Jian Wushuang murmured to himself. Then the Wuxia divine sword appeared in his hand. The fierce and overbearing sword essence soared into the sky as if it was going to cut the sky in half. In the next moment, Jian Wushuang looked down at the 20 iron-skirted guards and his eyes were extremely cold. Whoever stops me will die. Jian Wushuang took a step forward and the Wuxia divine sword flashed. The two of them turned into a sword light that pierced through the sky, the sun, and the moon and charged at the 20-odd iron-skirted guards. Reject! More than 20 iron-skirted guards had serious expressions on their faces. They took a step forward in unison and hacked down with their long axes. The axe lights suddenly merged together and turned into a light wave that could split the sky and earth. Then it hacked toward Jian Wushuang. But it was all useless. A blood-colored sword light slashed through the 20-some iron-skirted rulers, and their divine bodies began to collapse. The sword light pierced through the 20-some iron-skirted rulers. Whoosh! Then Jian Wushuang's figure appeared behind the 20-odd iron-skirted rulers. At this moment, the 20-some iron-skirted rulers finally crumbled, their bodies turning into dust and scattering into the air. He had killed more than 20 ultimate rulers with a single sword strike. In an instant, everyone in the city was shocked. These 20-some iron-skirted rulers weren't strong individually, but when they worked together, even the top-tier ultimate rulers would have to retreat. Ruler Lang, Divine Lord Tiansong, and the others behind the crowd narrowed their eyes. Humph! I didn't think that I would underestimate this blood sword. Ruler Lang's eyes flashed as he let out a cold snort. As for Divine Lord Tiansong, he squinted his eyes and shook his head. These 20-plus iron-skirted guards are just ordinary people amongst the ultimate rulers. They aren't much. If I were in their position, I would be able to do the same. Ruler Lang nodded, then replied, You're right. The 20 iron-skirted guards are just appetizers. If the blood sword is so weak, it's still far from Ruler Heavenly Snake Playboy's level. At the same time, in the depths of the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace, Heavenly Snake Playboy sat on the big chair, his golden vertical pupils shining. He directly saw Jian Wushuang, who had killed more than 20 iron-skirted guards with one stroke. Tisk, tsk. No wonder the Inyang slaves are no match for this person. He does have some strength. Heavenly Snake Playboy said with a faint smile on his face. The next moment, he stuck out his forked tongue, which was covered in saliva, and said, Maluo, hey tongue, help me take care of this blood sword. Yes. A muffled sound came from behind Heavenly Snake Playboy. Then, he saw two rays of red light behind the big chair that Heavenly Snake Playboy was sitting on in the endless darkness. Then, it was a pair of huge scarlet eyes. This pair of eyes was as large as a hanging red lantern, emitting a dark red light. It did not look like a human, but a huge monster. Immediately, The pair of eyes rose continuously as if a monster had awakened from its deep sleep and stood up from the earth. Boom! Boom! The huge hall began to emit a dull sound. The next moment, a human-shaped monster that was nearly 100 feet tall walked out from behind Heavenly Snake Playboy. The monster was huge, like an iron tower, and it exuded a terrifying aura. His skin was dark and his muscles were bulging like steel. His veins were as thick as his arms and they were twisted like tree roots. The monster's eyes were like red lanterns, emitting a red light. 2 fangs protruded from its lower lip and rose to its nostrils. On top of its head, there was a pair of curved and sharp horns that pierced into the sky as if they were going to pierce through the heavens. Xianxia, the 2 of us have already recovered nearly 50% of our strength. We will settle the matter between us after we help you deal with this person. A muffled sound came from the monster's mouth. Good. Maluo and Hei Tang, as long as you kill the man in the main hall, you will be able to regain your freedom and return to the back 8 cities. Heavenly Snake Playboy nodded. The monster with fangs and horns did not say anything else and walked out of the hall. The ground shook with every step he took. His figure completely walked out of the darkness, and on his shoulder sat a young boy with a wooden flute in his hand and his hair tied into a small braid. Step by step, the huge monster disappeared from the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. As for Heavenly Snake Playboy, he was still sitting on the big chair with a faint smile on his face. No one could tell what he was thinking. The last 8 cities. He raised his head and muttered to himself. Outside the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace, Jian Wushuang's expression was calm, as if he had just done something insignificant. He continued to walk forward step by step. Just as Jian Wushuang was about to step into the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace, his vision above him suddenly turned black, and all the light was blocked. Eh? What's going on? Jian Wushuang frowned and looked up in confusion. A huge and ferocious human face suddenly appeared above him. The pair of huge red lantern-like eyes were staring at him. This is... Jian Wushuang's expression changed. He could feel that the divine power of the monster in front of him was as vast as the ocean. The Maluo clan. In an instant, the people of the 8th city who were watching the battle from afar exclaimed. The Maluo clan was not considered a big clan in the universe due to their scarcity. However, every Maluo was extremely powerful. They did not cultivate principles or divine arts, but their bodies were naturally strong. With a palm and a foot, they had the power to tear the sky apart and crush the stars. Every single Maluo had the ability to cross realms in battle. Everyone looked at this Maluo and started discussing in low voices. I heard that Heavenly Snake Playboy had once saved a Maluo when he was in the 8th city. I didn't expect that Maluo would return to the 8th city with him. Maluo has the combat strength of the last 8 cities. Although I heard that he was seriously injured and I don't know if he has recovered his strength, it's enough to kill all rulers below the invincible ruler realm. Guys, look, that's Black Phoenix. The Black Phoenix is Maluo's companion. It's in charge of learning divine abilities and absolute arts to control Maluo's body. Every Maluo that possesses the Black Phoenix will be much more powerful than an ordinary Maluo. Exclamations and discussions could be heard. Jian Wushuang looked at the huge monster in front of him and could not help but frown. Bang! Before he could think further, Maluo had already raised his huge pitch-black arm and pressed it down on him. Before the arm pressed down, the wind it brought with it had already distorted the void and created a terrifying sound barrier. Good! The divine light in Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly increased by 3 inches. He quickly pulled out the Wuxia divine sword and slashed at the palm that covered the sky. Suddenly, a sharp and cold sword essence shot up into the sky. Jian Wushuang no longer held back, and the 3rd level of sword principal origin exploded at the same time with his divine power that was more than 13,000 times stronger. He slashed at the palm fiercely. The Wuxia divine sword slashed at the giant palm. Ever since it had been strengthened by the sword spirit of the tarot sword, the indestructible Wuxia divine sword had actually encountered an obstacle. It could only draw out a long string of golden sparks. The palm actually stopped for a moment before it pressed down on Jian Wushuang again. What? and scathed. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and his face was filled with surprise. At the same time, he quickly stepped on his right foot and jumped back to avoid the palm. Bang! An earth-shattering explosion rang out. When Maluo's palm slammed onto the ground, a huge five-fingered handprint pit that was hundreds of feet deep was formed. A white blast of air rose into the sky. At this moment, the void made a kacha sound similar to that of glass breaking. In the 8th city, the expressions of the many ultimate rulers who were watching the battle from afar changed when they saw this palm. One should know that the ancient path of stars was protected by the rules set by that lord. If Maluo's palm could cause such a terrifying destructive force under the rules, even a small planet would be shattered by this palm if it was in the outside world. Little guy, don't struggle. Maluo let out a low and cold voice. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and his eyes finally showed a touch of solemnness. As expected, the ancient path of stars was indeed the place where all the geniuses of all the races in the universe gathered. Even the current him had no choice but to be on guard against Maluo, who had walked out from the last 8 cities. Furthermore, Jian Wushuang looked at the child holding a wooden flute sitting cross-legged on Maluo's shoulder. The seriousness in his eyes grew. Compared to the huge and terrifying Maluo, this child, who had not spoken a single word since the beginning and had his eyes tightly shut, posed an even greater threat to him. Jian Wushuang gathered his thoughts and shouted coldly, "Split open the sky!" Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, the Wuxia divine sword trembled rapidly, letting out the cries of gods and devils, and the low chanting of Buddhas. Then, a huge blood-red sword light was slashed out. This sword strike was poignant to the extreme. It folded the void and came slashing down toward Maluo's head. Roar! Under this strike, Maluo opened his mouth and let out a roar that shook the 9 heavens and 10 lands. The terrifying sound waves actually condensed into a substance at this moment and spread out from Maluo's mouth in circles. However, in the face of Jian Wushuang's killer move, the sky-opening sword move, the sound wave only lasted for a few seconds before it was broken by the blood-red sword light. Then, it went for Maluo's head again. Maluo's pair of huge scarlet pupils immediately contracted. He raised his arms to block the attack. Clang! The blood-red sword light brought with it a poignant sword shadow as it hacked onto Maluo's arms ferociously. This time, it only caused a series of sparks. However, it was accompanied by Maluo's furious roar of pain. On his arm, there was a shallow white mark. "Little brat, you've angered me," Maluo bellowed furiously. He immediately stomped his feet heavily and dashed toward Jian Wushuang. Thump, 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 thump. The entire 8th city was quaking rapidly because of Maluo's rapid speed. Kill! Jian Wushuang's eyes were filled with fighting intent. As he faced Maluo, who was dashing toward him, he did not show any signs of backing down. He also charged toward Maluo at a high speed. The speed of the two became faster and faster, and finally, like 2 meteorites, they collided together. Bang! The Wuxia divine sword in Jian Wushuang's hand struck Maluo's fist fiercely, causing both of them to shake. Continue! Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. He turned his right hand and changed his move quickly. Once again, he thrust his sword at Maluo's throat. Clang! The tip of the Wuxia divine sword was pointed at Maluo's throat. A sharp and overbearing sword intent exploded, instantly blasting a huge white spot on Maluo's throat. As for Maluo's right palm, it also slammed onto Jian Wushuang's body and pressed him to the ground. "What an annoying little fellow!" Maluo's voice was low and deep. His huge palm pressed down on Jian Wushuang and slammed down on the ground at an extremely fast speed. Whoosh! Whoosh! The strong wind howled by Jian Wushuang's ears. Under the palm, Jian Wushuang had the illusion that he was being pressed down by 100,000 mountains. The great power contained in the palm was not something he could resist at all. Jian Wushuang's eyes began to flash quickly. Bang! The palm finally hit the ground. Kachuk! Under this palm, the earth began to crack inch by inch as if there was an earthquake. The cracks spread like a spider web, and the entire 8th city was blown into pieces. One pavilion after another fell, and some of the ultimate rulers standing on the ground paled and hurriedly rose to their feet. Blood sword! What? Ruler Hao Jin's heart instantly leaped into his throat as he cried out in alarm. Your Excellency, blood sword! Joshi also clenched her fists tightly, looking extremely nervous. Rumble! The smoke and dust gradually dispersed. The ground split apart where Maluo's giant palm had slammed down. Pavilions and halls collapsed, leaving behind broken walls and ruins. Maluo was panting heavily. 2 streams of red mist were spurted out from his nostrils. Little brat, go to hell! He lowered his head to look at his palm, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled up. He could feel that his destructive slap had hit Jian Wushuang perfectly. He also believed that his palm, which could shatter stars, could turn Jian Wushuang into a meat paste. He slowly raised his palm and looked down. What's going on? All of a sudden, Maluo's 2 spear-like eyebrows twisted. Under his palm, other than a huge pit that was dozens of feet deep, where was Jian Wushuang's figure? The next moment, sundering stars. A cold shout suddenly exploded in his ears. Maluo quickly turned his head and saw Jian Wushuang stepping in the air. With his black hair flying in the air, he held a silver sword rainbow and slashed at him fiercely. How could it be so fast? Maluo's expression changed. He could feel that his palm had hit Jian Wushuang at the first moment. Then when did Jian Wushuang escape? PFFF. Before he could react, the silver sword rainbow in Jian Wushuang's hand instantly pierced through the heaven and earth. Carrying the power to destroy stars, it slashed toward Maluo's huge arm. Roar! Maluo opened his mouth and roared loudly. He could feel that the power of this sword was even more terrifying than all the previous sword lights. The silver sword rainbow emitted a world-destroying power that even made him feel a sense of threat. Maluo had only felt this sense of threat from those geniuses and geniuses in the 8 cities behind him. Bang! Without any obstruction, the silver sword rainbow cut off Maluo's right arm like a knife cutting through tofu. Bang! The huge, pitch-black arm crashed into the ground, causing the 8th city to shake. As for Maluo, he immediately covered the area where his arm was broken with his other hand. He roared madly with eyes filled with hatred and anger. Countless drops of divine blood fell like a blood rain. The Maluo clan specialized in cultivating their physical bodies. They were different from ordinary cultivators. They were not like ordinary cultivators who could be immortal as long as their divine power was still present. Once their divine bodies were injured, it was a fatal blow. Without several thousand years, they couldn't recover. Little brat, you've completely infuriated me. Maluo's scarlet eyes were wide open. His chest was heaving up and down violently as he panted. At this moment he was truly enraged. Maluo trampling. Maluo opened his mouth and roared. He raised his giant foot and stomped on the ground ferociously. Bang! There was a loud explosion. Immediately, it was as if a tsunami had occurred in the 8th city, and the city trembled madly. Countless floorboards were flipped up, and the buildings that were still standing collapsed one after another. The entire 8th city was reduced to ruins in an instant. Immediately after, a huge shock wave spread out in all directions from Maluo. This shock wave swept past like a hurricane. Wherever the shock wave passed, the ground collapsed by a few hundred feet. Is this the combat power of the last 8 cities? He's too strong, as expected of an expert from the back 8 cities. It's hard to imagine that someone as powerful as Maluo could be injured to the point of near death in the last 8 cities. Just how heaven-defying are those top geniuses of the last 8 cities? At this moment, countless people cried out in horror. There were even some who laughed bitterly at themselves. We are both Omega rulers, but the difference between us is so great. Someone sighed. No matter if it was Jian Wushuang or Maluo, they both admitted that they were far from being a match for him. Bang! The battle was still ongoing. The shock wave rushed toward Jian Wushuang like a tide. Under the shock wave, Jian Wushuang was like a small boat in a raging sea. It was as if he would be crushed by the shock wave at any time. The principles of the universe, the power of will. Jian Wushuang snorted coldly without any expression. In an instant, the tenfold power of will granted to him by the laws of the universe was activated. In an instant, Jian Wushuang's aura began to soar. Suppress! Jian Wushuang shouted and stomped his right foot heavily. Instantly, the mountains and seas calmed down, and the shockwaves that had swept through everything gradually calmed down. Jian Wushuang stood still in the shock wave like a sea-stabilizing needle. When Maluo saw this scene, his huge pupils immediately contracted. Immediately after, he roared again. Maluo's charge! Bang! Maluo stomped his right foot heavily and bent his body. His curved and sharp horns pointed straight at Jian Wushuang. In the next moment, Maluo started to step down with his right foot and started to dash toward Jian Wushuang. Boom! 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 Just like the legendary Quafu chasing after the sun, Maluo's every step caused the 8th city to tremble. His speed was getting faster and faster. In the end, Maluo's body turned into a huge black light and charged forward ferociously. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and shouted again. Sundering stars! Bang! A silver sword rainbow was slashed out by Jian Wushuang and it slashed toward Maluo. And this was not the end. Jian Wushuang laughed in a low voice. Sundering stars! Sundering stars! Sundering stars! Several sundering stars were unleashed from the Wuxia divine sword in succession and bombarded Maluo. Boom! 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 Immediately, Maluo's charging figure began to slow down gradually as the silver sword rainbows slashed at his body. In the end, Maluo could no longer bear it as he roared in pain. His body stopped moving. At this moment, Maluo's huge and burly body was covered with sword marks that were so deep that his bones could be seen. These sword marks were densely intertwined like a spider web, looking extremely terrifying. Scarlet divine blood spurted out of his body, as if it was raining blood in the 8th city. Hoochie, hoochie, hoochie. Maluo panted heavily. 2 streams of red mist spurted out from his nose. You're a good opponent. You shouldn't risk your life for Heavenly Snake Playboy. Let him come out himself. Jian Wushuang stepped in the void and said indifferently. Upon hearing this, Maluo's expression changed. He did not reply, but turned his head to look at the child sitting on his shoulder. Black Phoenix, what should we do now? The child's eyes were still closed. His hoarse voice resounded in Maluo's mind. This man is right. We don't have to risk our lives for Heavenly Snake Playboy. Maluo hesitated for a moment before he said, But I promised Heavenly Snake that I would help him get rid of this person. We've already done enough for Heavenly Snake. Maluo, if I were to take action, the strength that we have recovered with great difficulty will return to its original state. You should think about it clearly. I won't stop you. After he finished speaking, the child who was sitting on Maluo's shoulder did not speak anymore. Maluo raised his head and fixed his gaze on Jian Wushuang. The Maluo clan had always kept their promises. They would never go back on their words once they had made a promise. Jian Wushuang looked at Maluo and could not help but sigh softly. He then shook his head. All right, I'll do as you wish. Jian Wushuang raised the Wuxia divine sword again and executed the star-slashing sword again. He then slashed at Maluo. A cold light exploded and thousands of silver rainbows condensed. All of Jian Wushuang's divine power was poured into the Wuxia divine sword, and he slashed it down at Maluo's head. Roar! Maluo opened his mouth and roared loudly. He similarly charged forward. Just as the silver sword rainbow was about to strike Maluo's body, the child sitting on his shoulder was about to open his eyes. A sudden change occurred. A huge snake tail shot out from the depths of the heavenly snake divine palace. Clang! This snake tail directly swept past Maluo and fiercely slapped the silver sword rainbow. Kachacha! Immediately, the silver sword rainbow broke into pieces like glass being cracked by an iron whip. After smashing the silver sword rainbow, the snake's tail immediately retracted at an even faster speed. Jian Wushuang took half a step back and raised his head to look in the direction of the snake tail. An evil-looking young man with an inverted triangle face, golden vertical pupils, and long hair draped over his back walked out from the depths of the heavenly snake divine palace while flicking his snake's tongue and making a heart-stopping sound. Heavenly snake playboy? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and there was a flash of light. The crowd watching the battle from a distance was already in an uproar with the appearance of this evil-looking young man. It's Heavenly Snake Playboy. It seems like Heavenly Snake Playboy can't hold back anymore. Is he going to do it himself? We haven't seen Heavenly Snake Playboy in action for tens of thousands of years. I didn't expect that he would be forced out by the Blood Sword this time. The Blood Sword can force Heavenly Snake Playboy to attack personally. Even if he loses, he should be proud. Many of the ultimate rulers in the 8th city exclaimed in surprise. Ruler Lang and the others immediately lowered their heads when they saw Heavenly Snake Playboy. A person's name was like a tree's shadow. The 3 words, Heavenly Snake Playboy, were definitely the most intimidating name in the top 10 cities. At this moment, Ruler Lang and the others realized that when they saw Heavenly Snake Playboy, they did not even have the courage to look him in the eye. It was as if they were afraid that Heavenly Snake Playboy would see them and know that they had come to kill them. Nothing had happened, but he felt extremely guilty. Among them, only Holy Maiden Joshi and Divine Lord Tiansong did not avoid their eyes. They looked at Heavenly Snake Playboy with hatred. Among the 2 of them, one was almost killed by the people sent by Heavenly Snake Playboy, and the other's entire clan was almost devoured by Heavenly Snake Playboy. Their fear of Heavenly Snake Playboy had long disappeared, leaving only resentment. Senior Brother Lang, are we really going to kill Heavenly Snake Playboy for junior sister Joshi? Ruler Kuangyi stood behind Lang as he said. He secretly raised his eyes and glanced at Ruler Heavenly Snake, who was walking out of the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. Lang's expression changed when he heard this. The Holy Maiden Joshi was the person with the highest status in the Jushi Holy Land, aside from the Master of the Holy Land. Although he was the senior brother of this group of disciples in terms of status, he was on the same level as the Holy Maiden Joshi. Therefore, if he wanted to rise up in the Jushi Holy Land, or even fight for the position of Holy Land Master in the future, he would have to rely on the Holy Maiden Joshi. Thinking of this, Lang gritted his teeth and pretended to be righteous. Humph! What are you afraid of? Isn't there a cannon fodder in front? Lang raised his head and looked at Jian Wushuang with a touch of jealousy in his eyes. He understood that after this battle, regardless of whether the Blood Sword won or lost, the name of the Blood Sword would definitely resound throughout the top 10 cities on the ancient Road of Stars. At the same time, he had no choice but to admit that this person called Blood Sword was probably much stronger than him in terms of strength. When he thought of how Holy Maiden Joshi had treated Jian Wushuang, the fire of jealousy in his heart burned even more. Divine Lord Tiansong, when the Blood Sword is killed by Heavenly Snake Playboy, we will attack and kill him while he is relaxed. Lang turned to look at Divine Lord Tiansong and said coldly. Divine Lord Tiansong nodded his head and he looked at Jian Wushuang with a deep fear. He wasn't a fool. Through the fight between Jian Wushuang and Maluo, he had already seen that Jian Wushuang's fighting power was definitely not below his. In fact, he might even be stronger. It's a pity. This Blood Sword is very capable. If he had joined forces with me, the chances of killing Heavenly Snake Playboy would have been greatly increased. Divine Lord Tiansong's eyes flashed and he shook his head. However, this person chose to face it alone. I really don't know if I should say that he is blindly arrogant or just plain stupid. Outside the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. Maluo, leave the following matters to me. Heavenly Snake Playboy approached him step by step. Finally, he stepped on the void and stood beside Maluo. He then spoke. All right, Heavenly Snake. I, Maluo, will owe you a favor this time. The next time you return to the 8 cities, I can help you with one more thing. Maluo replied in a rough voice. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and added, that is, if you can return to the back 8 cities. After he finished speaking, Maluo looked at Jian Wushuang deeply and left the place with big strides. Jian Wushuang did not stop Maluo from leaving. Instead, he looked at Heavenly Snake Playboy indifferently. He could feel that Maluo was not at his peak during the fight with him just now. It seemed that Maluo was injured and had been suppressing his own power. Moreover, someone was sitting on Maluo's shoulder. The boy with the wooden flute, who posed a greater threat to him, had not made a move yet. If it wasn't for this moment, Jian Wushuang wouldn't mind going all out and having a real battle with Maluo. However, the person he wanted to kill the most now was not Maluo, but Heavenly Snake Playboy. He and Heavenly Snake Playboy did not seem to have any sparks, but they had long understood that in the 8th city, only one of them would survive. As the 8th city trembled, Maluo disappeared from the 8th city's universe passage. Only Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy were left outside the door of the Heavenly Snake Divine Palace. Heavenly Snake Playboy, let's have a battle. Jian Wushuang held the Wuxia Divine Sword and said calmly. Hearing this, Heavenly Snake Playboy's eyes flickered, and then a faint, strange smile appeared on his face. He shook his head and said, "There's no rush, Blood Sword. A delicious meal must be cooked with patience in order to become delicious." Delicacies? Cooking? Jian Wushuang frowned and asked expressionlessly, "What do you mean? Blood Sword? Can't you feel it? The pure divine power aura on your body is too delicious, too mesmerizing." Staring at Jian Wushuang, Ruler Heavenly Snake stretched out his forked tongue and licked the corner of his mouth. Saliva dripped from his tongue as he closed his eyes, intoxicated. The next moment, he suddenly opened his eyes and laughed in a low voice. "So, Blood Sword, I'm going to eat you bit by bit. Only then can I enjoy my food." As soon as he finished speaking, Ruler Heavenly Snake's handsome face started to rot. The corners of his mouth curled all the way to the back of his ears, as if someone had used a pair of scissors to completely cut his mouth open from both sides. Ruler Heavenly Snake suddenly opened his mouth and his forked tongue shot out like a javelin. It carried a poison that was strong enough to kill an ultimate ruler and stabbed at Jian Wushuang. "Food? You're looking for death." A cold glint flashed in Jian Wushuang's eyes. He quickly raised his Wuxia Divine Sword and slashed at Ruler Heavenly Snake's tongue. Bang! However, Jian Wushuang's sword hit nothing. An afterimage? Then Jian Wushuang felt a huge force hit his chest. Jian Wushuang's figure retreated rapidly, leaving a long air wave in the air. What a fast speed! Jian Wushuang raised his head and his expression was extremely solemn. Heavenly Snake Playboy's forked tongue retracted like an iron chain. With his hands behind his back, he chuckled and said in a strange voice, "Blood Sword, come quickly. I can't wait to give you the reward." "You're just pretending." Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. He stomped his right foot heavily and suddenly shot out like a cannonball, turning into a sword light and charging toward Heavenly Snake Playboy. Slash! Jian Wushuang slashed down with his sword, and the sharp sword light cut through the world. "Blood Sword, you're too slow." Heavenly Snake Playboy only tilted his head slightly and dodged Jian Wushuang's slash. Then, his body twisted and disappeared from Jian Wushuang's sight. "Where is it?" Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and immediately spread out his divine power to find Heavenly Snake Playboy's position. "Are you looking for me?" A cold voice sounded behind Jian Wushuang's ears. There was a flash of killing intent in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Without looking back, he pulled out his sword and raised it up. Bang! A huge snake tail, like a giant axe that could split the sky, hacked down at Jian Wushuang and collided with the Wuxia Divine Sword. If Jian Wushuang was slower by even a second, he would have been hit by the snake tail. Your reaction isn't bad. Heavenly Snake Playboy flicked his tongue, twisted his body again, and disappeared behind Jian Wushuang. The next moment, a snake tail suddenly sprang out from under Jian Wushuang's feet, twisted his leg, and pulled it down with force. Bang! Immediately, Jian Wushuang was caught by the snake's tail and thrown down from the void into a pavilion that had been turned into ruins in the 8th city. As smoke and dust filled the air, a golden light flickered in Ruler Heavenly Snake's eyes. He pierced through the void and stomped again, shooting toward the pavilion. Pong, pong, pong. Boom, boom, boom. Immediately, the sound of Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake's rapid fighting could be heard from the dust-filled ruins. Did you guys notice? The blood sword is being suppressed. The Heavenly Snake clan dominates the universe with their speed. Although the blood sword's offensive power is strong, it's useless if it can't touch Lord Heavenly Snake Playboy. Lord Heavenly Snake Playboy is too fast. In the distance, countless cultivators of the 8th city who were watching the battle were discussing in low voices. As rulers who had reached the 8th city, they had good eyesight. From the few exchanges between Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy, they could tell that Jian Wushuang's attack power was not inferior to Heavenly Snake Playboy's, where the Joshi Holy Land disciples and Divine Lord Tiansong were. Lang, I don't think this blood sword can last much longer. Let's get ready and attack at any time. Divine Lord Tiansong stared at Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy, who were fighting in the smoke and dust, and said in a deep voice, I've already prepared it. Ruler Lang nodded, and a long, snow-white spear instantly appeared in his hands. Whoosh! A snake tail suddenly shot out. Jian Wushuang quickly pulled out his sword and split it. It's too fast. Jian Wushuang's face was gloomy and he kept looking around. He could only passively block the huge snake tail that was shooting out from the void. He had already exerted the tenfold will power given to him by the laws of the universe. However, even so, it was extremely difficult to even catch a glimpse of Heavenly Snake Playboy, let alone fight him. Even though he could see Heavenly Snake Playboy's figure occasionally, he had already disappeared after he slashed down with his sword. The feeling of punching cotton made Jian Wushuang extremely disgusted. Hiss, 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 hiss. The hissing sound of Heavenly Snake Playboy flicking his tongue came from all directions. Then, a cold and eerie laugh was heard. Blood sword, give up struggling. I will reward you well. I'll crush your bones bit by bit, absorb all of your divine power bit by bit, and burn your soul in divine fire for tens of thousands of years. What do you think of this reward? As he spoke, Ruler Heavenly Snake's figure shuttled back and forth in the void around Jian Wushuang. You're noisy. Jian Wushuang casually slashed the snake's tail and took a deep breath. He muttered to himself, I can't go on like this. Otherwise, I'll be exhausted to death here. After saying that, Jian Wushuang's eyes flashed and he made a decision in an instant. Innate divine power. Original universe. Bang. As soon as he finished speaking, an extremely mysterious force descended on the scene. The area within 1,000 feet of Jian Wushuang suddenly turned into a pitch-black domain. The original universe had a strong suppressive power. As long as Jian Wushuang was within the domain of the original universe, his power would increase by a large margin while his opponent's power would be greatly weakened. Immediately, Jian Wushuang looked up and saw Heavenly Snake Playboy standing not far to his right. He quickly moved to the side. I've found you. Jian Wushuang sneered, stepped with his right foot, and rushed toward Heavenly Snake Playboy. Whoosh! Split open the sky. A half-moon-shaped blood-red sword light struck out instantly and landed on Heavenly Snake Playboy. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Heavenly Snake Playboy did not expect that Jian Wushuang would be able to capture his position. The sword directly cut his shoulder, leaving a deep cut. You can see me now. The cold smile on Heavenly Snake Playboy's face disappeared, and he frowned. Heavenly Snake, go to hell. A cold voice was heard and Jian Wushuang charged again with his sword. Clang. A huge sword light instantly locked onto him, containing rich universe laws, and slashed at him ruthlessly. Looking at the huge sword light, Heavenly Snake Playboy's mouth pulled up into a strange smile again. He sighed and said, the prey is starting to resist. A trident appeared in Heavenly Snake Playboy's hand. Heavenly Snake Playboy turned his right hand and also slashed out a halberd light containing rich universe principles toward Jian Wushuang. Bang! The trident radiance and the sword radiance collided. At the point of contact, a huge circular shock wave exploded and spread out in all directions. Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy quickly exchanged thousands of moves. With the help of the original universe, Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy's speed finally reached the same level. Jian Wushuang's divine power was far stronger than Heavenly Snake Playboy's. The situation was reversed in an instant. Disgusting little bug. Jian Wushuang sneered in a low voice. The Wuxia divine sword in his hand continuously slashed out thousands of sharp sword chi. which bombarded Heavenly Snake Playboy like bombs. Secret skill, Sun Devouring. Facing the thousands of sharp sword chi, Heavenly Snake Playboy's face turned cold. He opened his mouth and bit at the thousands of sword chi. Boom! As Heavenly Snake Playboy opened his mouth, a huge phantom of a snake appeared behind him. The phantom of the giant snake opened its mouth and bared its fangs. With a fierce bite, it swallowed all the sword chi. Then, the giant snake phantom opened its mouth again and bit Jian Wushuang. Sundering stars. Jian Wushuang sneered, and the Wuxia divine sword immediately turned into a silver sword rainbow and slashed at the giant snake phantom. Bang! With an explosive sound, the giant snake phantom collapsed. Jian Wushuang followed him with a leap. He stretched out his 5 fingers and grabbed Heavenly Snake Playboy's head. Now, who is the prey? Jian Wushuang sneered and poured all the divine power that was 12,000 times more than his divine body into his right hand. He grabbed Heavenly Snake Playboy's head and pressed it to the ground. Bang! A huge pit appeared in the ground. Jian Wushuang raised his hand, grabbed Heavenly Snake Playboy's head, and pushed him toward a wall. Boom! 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 Jian Wushuang grabbed Heavenly Snake Playboy's head and pushed him forward, breaking hundreds of walls. The sharp sword essence wrapped around Jian Wushuang's fingers and exploded on Heavenly Snake Playboy's head. Poor little bug. Jian Wushuang sneered and threw ruler Heavenly Snake into a small lake in the 8th city with his right hand. Countless people were dumbfounded. No one had expected that the situation would be reversed so quickly. It was so fast that, before they could react, Heavenly Snake Playboy had been crushed by Jian Wushuang. The domain formed by the original universe gradually dissipated. Jian Wushuang held the Wuxia divine sword in his hand and walked toward the lake step by step. Whoosh! At this moment, the water in the small lake was overturned, and turbulent waves rose up. A huge black python suddenly swept out of the small lake and opened its mouth to roar. Blood sword, I've decided. Not only will I crush your divine body inch by inch, but I'll also slaughter your entire clan and kill all the people close to you in this world. The giant python stared at Jian Wushuang with an extremely cold gaze and spoke in the human language. The next moment, Heavenly Snake Playboy, who had transformed into his original body, suddenly rushed out of the lake and rushed toward Jian Wushuang. Pa 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 pa. A sound barrier-breaking explosion burst out beside his huge snake. His speed was more than 10 times faster now that he had returned to his original form. Jian Wushuang's vision blurred for a moment and he felt an extremely disgusting stench coming at him. It opened its huge mouth and bit him ruthlessly, swallowing him. Not good. The blood sword is going to be swallowed by Heavenly Snake Playboy. Legend has it that the stomach of the Heavenly Snake tribe is a small world of its own. Even the stars and the galaxy will be rapidly corroded and digested after being swallowed by the Heavenly Snake tribe. If the blood sword is swallowed by Heavenly Snake Playboy, there's no possibility of him surviving. The two of them are too strong. This is the first time I've seen the true form of the Heavenly Snake tribe. In the distance, countless rulers of the 8th city, who were watching the battle, had their eyes flashing wildly. As for ruler Hao Jin and holy maiden Joshi, they clenched their fists tightly and did not even dare to breathe loudly as they watched this scene. The snake's mouth reeked of blood. Jian Wushuang raised his Wuxia divine sword and blocked the snake's mouth that was closing. Waves of cold yin qi came from deep inside Heavenly Snake Playboy's body. Jian Wushuang knew that no matter how strong his divine body was, he would not be able to survive once Heavenly Snake Playboy swallowed him. Roar! Heavenly Snake Playboy roared madly. Jian Wushuang was in his mouth, but he could not bite the Wuxia divine sword that was supporting his upper jaw. Blood sword. Let's see how long you can last. Heavenly Snake Playboy's cold voice rang in Jian Wushuang's mind. And then, drops of venom, enough to kill an ultimate ruler, flowed through his fangs and onto the Wuxia divine sword. Immediately, the Wuxia divine sword, which was dripping with venom, let out a sizzling sound as it was burned. Black spots the size of fingernails appeared on the Wuxia divine sword where the poison had dripped, and black poisonous smoke rose. Seeing this, Jian Wushuang's heart sank. He was afraid that even the Wuxia divine sword, which had reached the limit of a principal's cardinal treasure, would not be able to last long under the poison. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang's expression became calm again. He said word by word, "Innate divine ability, life intimidation, /*. Boom! In an instant, countless forces surged around Jian Wushuang. At this moment, Jian Wushuang did not hold back any of his trump cards. Except for the Tarot Divine Sword and Eternal Night, he used all of his strength. Today, I, Blood Sword, will show the world what I'm capable of. At that moment, Jian Wushuang's aura was extremely powerful. A pressure from the depths of his soul suddenly descended. This was the power of intimidation. In an instant, time seemed to have frozen. Everything began to slow down, as if they had fallen into a quagmire. Under this power, Heavenly Snake Playboy actually felt that he was extremely small, and he had a feeling of wanting to worship him. This was the way a higher being looked down on a lower being. This was a complete suppression of inferior life forms from the soul and bloodline of a perfect life form. Jian Wushuang took advantage of this brief moment of sluggishness and immediately shot out of Heavenly Snake Playboy's mouth. Then he slashed down with the Wuxia divine sword. Sundering stars. Bang! In an instant, a 1,000-foot-long sword rainbow condensed in Jian Wushuang's hand. Like a god descending to the world, his black hair fluttered and the silver sword rainbow slashed toward Heavenly Snake Playboy's head. Ka-ka-ka. At this moment, the void trembled because of this sword intent, and it let out a cracking sound. Suddenly, the silver sword rainbow fell directly on the giant python that Heavenly Snake Playboy had transformed into, opening a deep wound. Roar! Heavenly Snake Playboy let out an extremely shrill scream. Divine blood spurted out from his snake body and splattered on the ground, burning countless holes in the ground. Under this sword, Heavenly Snake Playboy's divine power was obliterated. The sharp sword will continue to ring in his body, killing the divine power in his body. Roar! Due to the excruciating pain, Ruler Heavenly Snake writhed on the ground. His huge tail smacked the entire 8th city, causing it to shake. At this moment, the countless cultivators of the 8th city who were watching the battle from afar were shocked to the extreme. Heavenly Snake Playboy, he's been defeated? 2. Snake slaying? Is Heavenly Snake Playboy really going to die at the hands of the Blood Sword? Something big has happened. This is going to be a big problem. Invincible. The Blood Sword is invincible. Who can block the Blood Sword? When countless people saw this scene, their faces were first filled with shock, and then they shouted in disbelief. Ruler Lang and the others also had looks of disbelief on their faces. Did this Blood Sword really defeat Heavenly Snake Playboy? Lang's eyes flashed with disbelief. Behind him, the Joshi Holy Land disciples were so frightened that their eyes almost popped out. Divine Lord Tiansong's eyes flickered continuously, and his gaze toward Jian Wushuang was filled with fear. However, he quickly calmed down after taking a deep breath. In his expectation, Jian Wushuang should have been killed by Heavenly Snake Playboy. Then, he would take advantage of Heavenly Snake Playboy's relaxed vigilance to kill Jian Wushuang in one blow. But now, although the expectations were different, the effect was no different. Lang, now is the time. It's our turn to attack. A cold glint flashed in Divine Lord Tiansong's eyes as he turned around and shouted. Bang! At once, Divine Lord Tiansong stomped his feet and shot up into the sky, shooting toward Heavenly Snake Playboy. Lang's eyes flickered with thoughts. He looked at Jian Wushuang coldly and sneered. Blood Sword, you are indeed very strong. However, I will be taking the head of Heavenly Snake Playboy. Whoosh! He held the snow-white divine spear in his hand and also swept up. Junior Sister Joshi, watch how I cut off the head of Heavenly Snake Playboy. He looked back at Holy Maiden Joshi and said proudly. The next moment, Divine Lord Tiansong and Ruler Lang did not hesitate any longer and charged toward Heavenly Snake Playboy at the same time. Heavenly Snake, those who commit injustice are doomed to destruction. Do you know who I am? Divine Lord Tiansong laughed, and a blue saber appeared in his hand. Lightning rolled on the saber, and it slashed toward Heavenly Snake Playboy. Heavenly Snake Playboy, remember, Lang is the one who killed you. Ha ha ha. Lang laughed as well. His body flashed, and he stabbed toward Heavenly Snake Playboy's head with his snow-white spear. This change had come too quickly. It was so fast that Jian Wushuang did not even have time to react. By the time Jian Wushuang reacted, Divine Lord Tiansong and Ruler Lang had already passed him and were closing in on Heavenly Snake. Idiot! Jian Wushuang's face suddenly turned extremely gloomy. Heavenly Snake Playboy was now in an extremely dangerous situation. Even he planned to avoid it. If the two of them rushed forward now, was it really certain that Heavenly Snake Playboy would die? Heavenly Snake Playboy, who was sprawled on the ground with divine blood gushing out of his mouth, raised his head and looked at Divine Lord Tiansong and Ruler Lang, who were shooting toward him. His golden vertical pupils suddenly showed joy. Buzz! Before Divine Lord Tiansong and Ruler Lang could get close to him, his huge snake tail shot out and wrapped around Divine Lord Tiansong's body, pulling him fiercely. Boom! 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 Divine Lord Tiansong's expression changed drastically. He felt that after being wrapped by the snake's tail, he could not use any of his divine power. The lightning that was rolling on the divine knife in his hand exploded on the snake's tail, but it only left a black mark. How is that possible? Divine Lord Tiansong was shocked. Ruler Lang's face instantly went pale with terror. He looked at Divine Lord Tiansong, who was struggling, and he felt his entire body tremble in fear. Run! Ruler Lang took a step forward, immediately preparing to flee. Before he could take 2 steps, a forked tongue shot out of Heavenly Snake Playboy's mouth, wrapped around Ruler Lang, and pulled him back toward Heavenly Snake Divine Lord. No! Ruler Lang struggled and howled. However, it was of no use. If Heavenly Snake Playboy had not met Jian Wushuang, he would definitely be the most terrifying existence in the top 10 cities on the ancient road of stars. How could he resist? Ruler Lang was instantly swallowed by Heavenly Snake Playboy, and his huge, sharp fangs stabbed into his neck. Ruler Lang's divine power was constantly being sucked away by Heavenly Snake Playboy. Ruler Lang began to struggle madly, but after a few seconds he gradually stopped moving. His hands and feet went limp, and in the end, his divine body turned into dust. Heavenly Snake Playboy's injuries and the divine power that Jian Wushuang had obliterated immediately recovered at a speed that was visible to the naked eye. The cultivators of the 8th city, who were watching the battle from afar, shook their heads without any pity when they saw this. This person is truly stupid to the extreme. Humph! Who is Lang? Does he really think that anyone can step on his head? Does this person think he's a blood sword? Is Heavenly Snake Playboy someone he can provoke? He really deserved to die. He can't do anything right, but he's good at ruining things. The rulers who were watching the battle looked at the people from the Jushi Holy Land with ridicule. The next moment, they let out a long sigh. It's a pity for the blood sword. It took me so much effort to severely injure Heavenly Snake Playboy and kill him. But now, because of this idiot, Heavenly Snake Playboy has recovered. The blood sword is in danger. The spectators looked at Jian Wushuang and shook their heads with a sigh. Joshi Holy Land. Hao Jin, won't rest until you're dead. Die! Ruler Hao Jin's eyes almost popped out of his head as he charged toward the Joshi disciples. On the other side, Heavenly Snake Playboy's snake tail swung again and he swallowed Divine Lord Tiansong. In an instant, the huge wound on Heavenly Snake Playboy's body that was cut by Jian Wushuang's star-slashing sword rainbow began to recover. In just a few breaths, it was completely healed. Hiss, hiss, hiss. Heavenly Snake Playboy slowly raised his head and let out a cold smile. Blood sword. It seems like even the heavens don't want me to die. He looked at Jian Wushuang and said sarcastically. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold and he replied indifferently, If I can kill you once, I can kill you a second time. Is that so? Heavenly Snake Playboy chuckled without a care. The next moment, Blood sword, you should die. His face suddenly became distorted and his huge golden vertical pupils were filled with ruthlessness and madness. He bounced up from the ground again and shot toward Jian Wushuang. "You're the one who should die." Jian Wushuang snorted coldly with an expressionless face. He lowered his head to look at the black spot on the Wuxia divine sword that had been scalded by the venom. With a flip of his right hand, he put the Wuxia divine sword back into his interspatial ring. After doing all this, Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and his expression became calm. He closed his eyes and slowly said, "Divine body appear." In an instant, Jian Wushuang's body emitted a sound similar to frying beans. A wave of energy that came from the deepest part of his soul and the deepest part of his perfect life form began to gush out. Under this power, his divine body started to grow. 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, 10,000 miles, 30,000 miles, 60,000 miles. At this moment, everyone's face froze and their eyes widened in disbelief. An unimaginable giant, tens of thousands of miles tall, and surrounded by endless immortal radiance, appeared in front of Heavenly Snake Playboy. His face was surrounded by chaos, only revealing a trace of his appearance. He looked exactly the same as Jian Wushuang. His power was indescribable and powerful beyond comprehension. It was as if he could break the universe with a raise of his hand and destroy the earth with a step. Heavenly Snake Playboy, who was originally huge, was like an ant under the feet of the giant. Under countless shocked gazes, Jian Wushuang slowly opened his eyes. 2 bolts of lightning flashed across his eyes. Other than having divine power and a soul that far surpassed cultivators of the same realm, special creatures also had a divine body at its strongest state. This was the first time Jian Wushuang had revealed his divine body to the world. The entire 8th city was shocked. What is this? Heavenly Snake Playboy's speed came to a sudden halt. He raised his head and looked at the giant surrounded by countless immortal light, and his golden vertical pupils shrank. A cold chi rushed to his head. For the first time, Heavenly Snake Playboy felt fear in his heart. Retreat! Heavenly Snake Playboy's eyes flickered. He was uncertain about the giant who had transformed into Jian Wushuang's divine body. He immediately made a decision to avoid the sharp edge first. In an instant, Heavenly Snake Playboy was about to shoot into the distance. Looking at Heavenly Snake Playboy who was far away, Jian Wushuang's expression did not change at all and he spoke calmly. Suppress. In an instant, Jian Wushuang was like a god who controlled the life and death of the world and set the law. An indescribable divine power gathered in Jian Wushuang's giant hand and pressed down on Heavenly Snake Playboy. Boom! No words could describe the horror of this palm. The entire world was covered by a giant palm. There was no light, no earth, and no sky. Under this palm, Heavenly Snake Playboy seemed to have turned into a small snake that was at the mercy of others and was suppressed by Jian Wushuang's hand. Roar, roar, roar! Heavenly Snake Playboy screamed and howled. However, no matter how he struggled, he could not move at all. As if he was being pressed down by a million mountains. The sharp and fierce sword essence was activated by Jian Wushuang. It exploded between his 5 fingers and bombarded Heavenly Snake Playboy continuously. Boom! 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 Heavenly Snake Playboy's snake body kept exploding, condensing, and exploding again. This process was repeated thousands of times. As Heavenly Snake Playboy let out a shrill roar, everyone was shocked to see this scene. They felt a chill down their spine as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. This is too terrifying. Countless people's lips trembled as they spoke. After a while, when Jian Wushuang raised his palm again, it had already turned into nothingness. Heavenly Snake Playboy had been completely annihilated. Kacha kacha kacha. Jian Wushuang's 68,000-mile-long divine body gradually shrank and returned to normal after a while. At that moment, the entire 8th city fell into a deathly silence. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. No one was discussing it and no one made a sound. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Jian Wushuang and they were all shocked. Until now, their minds were still filled with Jian Wushuang's indomitable and 68,000-mile divine body. The same thought appeared in their minds at the same time. I want to compete with the heavens. After returning to his normal form, Jian Wushuang's aura was extremely weak and he almost fell from the sky. The price of using the divine body once is too great. Jian Wushuang laughed bitterly. Outsiders only thought that he had killed Heavenly Snake Playboy with a flip of his hand. Only he knew how much he had paid. At this moment, his divine power was almost completely exhausted, and his entire body was in pain as if it had been stabbed by needles. His divine body was on the verge of exploding. But it's good. It's not like I didn't gain anything. Jian Wushuang smiled and turned his head to look at the place where Heavenly Snake Playboy had died. He saw 2 sharp fangs and an interspatial ring floating in the air. Drops of pitch-black venom dripped down the fangs, corroding the ground and creating huge pits. Jian Wushuang waved his hand and took the 2 poisonous fangs and Heavenly Snake Playboy's interspatial ring. Then, Jian Wushuang took out a few divine herbs from his interspatial ring that could quickly replenish divine power. He sat down cross-legged to recover his divine power. Each of these divine herbs was extremely precious. However, to Jian Wushuang, who had obtained the complete treasures of the Tarot ruins, they were nothing. When his divine power had recovered slightly, Jian Wushuang stood up and walked toward the crowd. In an instant, everyone automatically made way for him and looked at Jian Wushuang with extreme respect. Jian Wushuang walked past them slowly and finally stopped in front of the Joshi Holy Land disciples. It was time to settle some scores. Sir Bloodsword. Joshi had a complicated expression on her face as she called out softly. You, get out of the way. Jian Wushuang looked at Holy Maiden Joshi and said. Joshi opened her mouth and wanted to say something. In the end, she sighed and stepped aside silently. Instantly, the Joshi Holy Land disciples standing behind the Holy Maiden Joshi, such as Kuangyi and Xuanshan, changed their expressions and asked, Bloodsword, what do you want to do? Bloodsword, don't go too far. We're disciples of Joshi Holy Land. The Bloodsword. Pa! Before they could finish, Jian Wushuang raised his palm and slapped them. This slap did not contain any divine power, but it still landed on the faces from the vast and unfettered god. I've already killed Heavenly Snake Playboy. Why would I care about the Joshi Holy Land? Jian Wushuang said coldly. At once, the faces of ruler Kuangyi and the others turned red with anger, but they did not dare to say anything. They could only cover their faces and lower their heads, not daring to look at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang had killed Heavenly Snake Playboy with 1 palm. It was so fierce that they had long been scared out of their wits. Their previous questions were just a show of aggression. When Jian Wushuang's palm came, they could not even do the most basic dodging. Idiot! In the end, Jian Wushuang looked at them coldly and turned to leave. If it were not for the disciples of Joshi Holy Land, he would not have needed to use his divine body. Ruler Hao Jin followed Jian Wushuang closely. Before he left, he glared at the Joshi Holy Land and snorted. Let me tell you, Lord Bloodsword is very broad-minded. He only slapped you once and let it go. However, I, Hao Jin, am a narrow-minded person. If I see you on the ancient path of stars path in the future, I'll kill anyone I see. Then he quickly followed Jian Wushuang and walked away. After Jian Wushuang left, the deathly silent crowd began to boil with excitement. He killed Heavenly Snake Playboy with Bloodsword Palm and became the first in the 8th city. When the divine manifestation appears, the world is shocked. The blood sword is proof of his invincibility. The Heavenly Snake Playboy killed by the blood sword is the #1 person in the top 10 cities of the ancient path of stars. In an instant, the battle between Jian Wushuang and Heavenly Snake Playboy spread like a hurricane. Not only did it spread to the 8th city, but it also spread to the other Grotto Heaven cities and worlds on the ancient path of stars road at an extremely fast speed. The 7th city, the 6th city, the 5th city, even the 9th city and 10th city after the 8th. The name Bloodsword had completely shaken the ancient road of stars. For a moment, the name Bloodsword was in the limelight. In the top 10 cities on the ancient path of stars, everyone was talking about the battle between the Bloodsword and Heavenly Snake Playboy. Some said that Jian Wushuang was the deity of a top power in the universe and that he had come to the ancient path of stars road to train. Some said that Jian Wushuang was the son of a top supreme and that he had supreme secret techniques. For a time, discussions about Jian Wushuang filled the top 10 cities on the ancient road of stars. However, there were thousands of people and the stories that came out of their mouths naturally came into countless versions. However, when the news reached them from the first city, which was extremely far away, the entire top 10 cities on the ancient path of the starry sky were shaken. The blood sword that killed Heavenly Snake Playboy was only a 5th stage ruler. Countless people could not believe it. The blood sword that could kill Heavenly Snake Playboy, an invincible ultimate ruler, was only at the 5th level ruler. Freak! A heaven-defying genius! The blood sword was only a 5th stage great ruler, but he was able to kill Heavenly Snake Playboy, who was an unrivaled ultimate ruler. When the blood sword reaches the level of an ultimate ruler, who in the universe can stop him unless the Supremes appear? I'm afraid that even those monstrous geniuses from the depths of the ancient path of stars are only at this level. The blood sword will definitely become one of the new powerhouses on the ancient path of stars. They were shocked when they found out that Jian Wushuang had killed Heavenly Snake Playboy. They were shocked now. Countless people went crazy. The changes in the outside world were like a whirlpool. Jian Wushuang, who had caused all this, was sitting cross-legged on a mountain in the 8th city. The night wind blew and the stars twinkled. Jian Wushuang was wearing a black robe and sitting cross-legged. Countless divine power surrounded his body and nourished his divine body. His exhausted divine power was quickly recovering. After a while, Jian Wushuang slowly let out a breath of turbid air and opened his eyes. A divine light quietly flashed in his eyes. I've finally recovered. Jian Wushuang smiled. After killing Heavenly Snake Playboy, he was not in a hurry to leave the 8th city. Instead, he found a mountain outside the 8th city to recover his divine power. After several dozen days of rest, his exhausted divine power had finally recovered. As for Jian Wushuang, he finally had a clear idea of his strength after the battle with Heavenly Snake Playboy. If I use all my techniques, I'll be able to kill an invincible Omega ruler, but the price will be enormous. Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. The Eternal Night Sword and the Tarot Divine Sword were naturally not included in the list of techniques he had mentioned. When he was a ruler of the 4th level, he had killed the 3rd Prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom and Lord Jinan of the Great Sun Divine Kingdom with one strike. Although Heavenly Snake Playboy was strong, he was not much stronger than the 3rd Prince and Lord Jinan. If Jian Wushuang directly activated Eternal Night, it would be enough to kill Heavenly Snake Playboy in an instant. Even if he were to face the 9th Culpa King, Jian Wushuang was confident that he could fight him. However, doing so would naturally violate the original intention of Jian Wushuang coming to the ancient road of stars. Eternal Night was powerful, but it was someone else's sword principle. It was Tarot Supremacy's sword principle, not his. If he relied on the Eternal Night for everything, then no matter how powerful he became in the future, he would just be a shadow living under the body of Tarot. Tarot Supremacy was known as the number 1 swordsman since ancient times. His title was the Sword Supremacy, and no one had broken his legend. Countless experts of the Tao of the Sword followed his sword Tao and spent countless years studying it. However, the result was that they could never surpass him. This was not what Jian Wushuang wanted. If Jian Wushuang wanted to surpass Tarot ruler in the future, the only way was to keep growing his own strength and create his own invincible sword principle. Jian Wushuang was very clear about this. In the end, I'm still a little weak. Jian Wushuang sighed and looked down at the 8th city. He saw that the 8th city, which had been turned into ruins by him and Heavenly Snake Playboy, had gradually returned to normal in the past dozens of days. Jian Wushuang could not help but sigh again. What kind of great power did the Lord who opened the ancient path of stars have? Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang raised his head and looked at the boundless starry sky. Looking at the starry sky, Jian Wushuang could feel that after he killed Heavenly Snake Playboy, the pair of eyes that were silently watching him from behind became more obvious. It seems that the further I go, the more powerful I am, and the more attention I will receive from that lord, the chances of me getting the qualification to the Grand Clan gathering will be higher. Jian Wushuang thought for a moment. After a while, Jian Wushuang gathered his thoughts and took a deep breath. It's time to leave this place. The 8th city had never been Jian Wushuang's goal. The battle with Heavenly Snake Playboy was just one of the most ordinary battles he had fought in the past 300,000 years. He would continue to move forward. Hao Jin, let's go, he said as he strode toward the entrance of the 8th city. They're here. Ruler Hao Jin, who was cultivating in seclusion, shuddered when he heard Jian Wushuang's words. He quickly stood up and followed Jian Wushuang into the distance. No one knew that Jian Wushuang had left the turbulent 8th city quietly and headed deeper. Jian Wushuang and ruler Hao Jin disappeared from the 8th city in the dark night. There was a distortion in the void. When Jian Wushuang opened his eyes again, he had already arrived at the 9th city. There was not much difference between the 9th city and the 8th city, other than the fact that the space was more stable and the aura of rules was more intense. There was not much difference. The two of them did not stay long in 9th city and headed straight for the city lord's residence. The lord of the 9th city was a veteran Omega ruler who had spent dozens of chaos cycles in the Omega ruler realm. Although he was powerful, he was limited by his natural talent. He had already reached the end of his cultivation path, and had long since lost all desire to fight. Jian Wushuang carried the might of killing Heavenly Snake Playboy and was extremely arrogant. The city lord of the 9th city naturally did not want to provoke such a strong enemy for no reason. Therefore, he only symbolically stopped Jian Wushuang and let him leave the 9th city. Lord Bloodsword, the 10th city is a dividing line on the ancient path of stars. After passing through the 10th city, you can be said to have reached the depths of the ancient path of stars. The last 8 cities are completely different from the top 10 cities. They are the world of geniuses and geniuses. The geniuses of the top forces in the universe, as well as the divine sons and holy sons of the ancient holy lands, all gather in the last 8 cities. Ruler Hao Jin said with a look of envy. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang couldn't help but look at him teasingly and said, "You're not that strong, but you know quite a lot." Ruler Hao Jin's face reddened upon hearing this, and he awkwardly scratched his head. "When I was in the 3rd city, I couldn't go any further. So I could only find out about the stories of these experts for fun." After a pause, Ruler Hao Jin continued, "But Lord Bloodsword, do you know the 9 magnates in the back 8 cities?" "The 9 magnates?" Jian Wushuang was interested. He raised his eyebrows and said, "What are these 9 magnates?" Ruler Hao Jin thought for a moment, then said, "The happenings in the 8 cities are rarely spread, so I don't know much about them. I've only heard that although the Heaven's Pride experts are gathered in the back 8 cities and the stars are dazzling, in general, the 9 magnates are still the most respected. These 9 magnates manage the last 8 cities of the ancient path of stars together. In the last 8 cities, no matter how monstrous a genius is, they have to rely on the 9 magnates to survive. These 9 powerhouses are also known as the 9 most powerful figures in the history of the ancient path of stars. He's also the one most likely to participate in the Grand Clan gathering. I heard that the Lord who opened the ancient path of stars will choose 10 children to listen to the Tao in the grand meeting of all races in the universe. 3 of these 10 children will be chosen from the ultimate rulers. If everyone's guess is right, these 3 ruler seats should be chosen by 3 of the 9 overlords." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang thought for a moment and then asked, "Then who are the 9 magnates?" "This? I'll have to think about it carefully." Ruler Hao Jin lowered his head and began to think hard. Only after a few moments did he hesitantly say, "Lord Bloodsword, the 8 cities on the ancient path of stars are too far away from me. Therefore, I don't know much about them. I only know a few of the 9 magnates." After a pause, Ruler Hao Jin said in a deep voice, "Among the 9 magnates, there's the Crown Prince of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, the young Emperor of the Defeng Divine Kingdom, the Blood Sky Palace's current blood disciple, the unparalleled conqueror with the undying overlord body that's hard to come by in a million years, and the guardian of the 10th city, Lord Blue." Hearing this, Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up. Defeng Divine Kingdom. the Defeng Divine Kingdom, the Blood Sky Palace. He was not unfamiliar with these powers. Back in the Tarot ruins, he had fought with the unrivaled ultimate rulers that these three powers had sent. I didn't expect to encounter people from these three forces on the ancient path of stars again. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and a cold glint flashed in his eyes. However, whether or not they would fight would have to wait and see the situation. Who is Lord Blue? Jian Wushuang asked after collecting his thoughts. At the mention of Lord Blue, a hint of admiration appeared in ruler Hao Jin's eyes. He said, Lord Blue is the only big shot who remained in the top 10 cities. Of course, this is not because he is weak, but because he seemed to have made a bet with someone that the loser would never be able to step into the back 8 cities. Lord Blue's background is mysterious. No one knows where he came from, whether he's a man or a woman, or even what his name is. It's only because he always wears blue clothes and wears a blue veil all year round that he's called Lord Blue. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang immediately understood. Given how vast the universe was, it was not impossible for a top-tier ultimate ruler to suddenly appear. He was not someone who would get to the bottom of things. So he smiled and said, It doesn't matter to us who this Lord Blue is. As long as he's willing to let us enter the 8th city, it'll be fine. Then, Jian Wushuang patted ruler Hao Jin's shoulder and said, Let's go, he said. As soon as he finished speaking, Jian Wushuang took a step forward and entered the universe passage in the 9th city. 10th city, I, Hao Jin, am here. Ruler Hao Jin sighed and followed Jian Wushuang. They also disappeared into the universe passage in the 9th city. At the same time, in the universe, in the Great Void Star System, which was extremely far away from the ancient path of stars path, the first Hall Master of the Great Void Temple, Bing Yi, and the second Hall Master, Fui, the Hall Master of the 7th Hall, Zhou Kuan. The Palace Masters of the 7 Palaces stood respectfully in front of a black tower. They cupped their hands in unison and said, We, the Palace Masters of the 7 Palaces, welcome the return of Sir Divine Emperor. Inside the Great Void Temple, the black spire stood upright like a sword and thunder rumbled in the sky. The 7 Hall Masters of the Great Void Temple all stood respectfully below the spire. They bowed their heads and cupped their hands, their expressions solemn. Rumble! A thunderbolt suddenly exploded in the sky. A middle-aged man in a royal robe walked down from the sky. This middle-aged man was the founder of the Great Void Temple, Divine Emperor Tai Su. Greetings, Sir Divine Emperor. The 7 Hall Masters knelt on the ground and spoke at the same time. The middle-aged man's entire body was bathed in lightning, with lightning snakes circling around him. He nodded indifferently and said, You may rise. Yes. The 7 Hall Masters stood up. I've returned this time to discuss 2 things. Divine Emperor Tai Su stood with his hands behind his back and spoke indifferently. The 7 Hall Masters did not say a word and listened to Divine Emperor Tai Su's words. Firstly, I will no longer be the Emperor God of the Great Void Temple. I have already chosen the person who will take over the position of Emperor God. Divine Emperor Tai Su spoke indifferently. As soon as these words were spoken, the Palace Masters of the 7 Palaces burst into an uproar. Sir Divine Emperor, you must not do this. Immediately, a few Palace Masters walked out from among the 7 Palace Masters and cupped their hands in greeting. When has it ever been anyone's turn to dispute the things I've decided? Divine Emperor Tai Su looked at them indifferently. Immediately, the Hall Masters trembled and did not dare to say anything more. They only had many thoughts in their minds. However, before they could think further, Divine Emperor Tai Su continued. After I leave, the first Hall Master, Bing Yi, will be in charge of becoming Emperor God Taishu. The 7 halls of the Great Void Temple will have to listen to Hall Master Bing Yi's command. Do you understand? The 7 Hall Masters of the Great Void Temple looked at Hall Master Bing Yi with complex expressions. Hall Master Bing Ye's expression did not change much upon hearing this. He merely cupped his hands and said, Celestial Emperor, don't worry. I will definitely manage the Great Void Temple well and not let you down. Divine Emperor Tai Su nodded his head in satisfaction after hearing that. Then he changed the topic and continued. The second thing is that it's time to remove the seal on Qiulong and let him rule the ancient path of stars. What? That madman is about to be released. I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing to let this madman out. The hall masters of the 7 halls frowned. However, they also knew that with the death of Divine Sun Qingsu, the only way for the Great Void Temple to obtain a position on the ancient path of stars was to release Qiulong and head to the ancient path of stars. Divine Emperor Tai Su's eyes flashed and he turned to look at the black tower behind him. He waved his hand, and the black iron gate of the black tower behind him slowly opened. Behind the door was endless darkness. Gusts of old dust were blown out of the door along with a cold wind. Then, they heard heavy panting coming from the iron gate, as if a monster was about to break out. Taichi, Taichi. The sound of iron chains rubbing against the floor was heard. A moment later, a hunched monster gradually walked out of the darkness of the minaret. The monster's skin was green, and there was a row of spikes on its back. Its hands and feet were shackled with black iron. The taste of freedom. The monster raised its head and sighed, slowly opening its eyes. There were only the whites of his eyes, no eyeballs. He turned his head to look at the 7th Palace's palace master and laughed hideously. 7 hall masters. It's been 10 chaos cycles, I suppose. Long time no see. When the 7 hall masters heard this, they coldly snorted without any expression. The monster wanted to continue speaking, but Divine Emperor Tai Su said indifferently, Qiulong, I let you out this time because I have something for you to do. Hee, I knew it. You guys definitely need me for something. Hearing this, Qiulong chuckled and then pouted. Isn't this your usual way of doing things? When you need me, you release me. After you've used me, you'll seal me. Divine Emperor Tai Su frowned when he heard that and said indifferently, After you've done this, I can truly set you free. Oh! Qiulong's pupils shrank, and a trace of suspicion flashed through his eyes. Divine Emperor, are you serious? When have I ever lied to you when I speak? Divine Emperor Tai Su replied indifferently. All right. Hearing this, Qiulong rolled his eyes and said, Divine Emperor, speak. What do you need me to do this time? I let you out this time because I want you to represent the Great Void Immortal sect and head to the last city on the ancient path of stars to compete for the chance to participate in the Myriad Clan Grand Meeting in the universe. Divine Emperor Tai Su said, The ruler ancient path of stars? But, a ruler. Hearing this, Qiulong sneered in disdain, and a flash of ruthlessness flashed in his eyes. Divine Emperor Tai Su waved his right hand and the shackles on Qiulong disappeared. All of a sudden, an earth-shaking aura surged with Qiulong as the center. Qiulong slowly straightened his back and twisted his neck, making cracking sounds. Not long after, Divine Emperor Tai Su left the Great Void Star area. Just as Qiulong was about to head for the ancient path of stars, Supreme Bingyi suddenly called out to him. Qiulong, after you go to the ancient path of stars, help me kill someone. Oh! Qiulong raised his eyebrows and became interested. Kill who? Supreme Bingyi flipped his right hand and a mystic light mirror appeared in his hand. He handed it to Qiulong and said, Let's kill this man in the mirror. Qiulong lowered his head and looked at the mirror. He saw a cold-looking young man in a black robe holding a blood-red divine sword. Who is he? Asked Qiulong with a frown. Blood sword. Supreme Ingyi spat out these 2 words indifferently. Meanwhile, back on the ancient path of the starry sky, Jian Wushuang and ruler Hao Jin stepped into the 10th city. Lord Bloodsword. In front of us is one of the 9 overlords, Lord Blue. Ruler Hao Jin said as he pointed at the largest castle in the 10th city. Lord Bloodsword, the first 10 cities are different from the last 8 cities on the ancient path of stars. The city lord of the 10th city is also known as the Pass Suppression Envoy. If you want to go to the last 8 cities, you must obtain the pass-through document from the Pass Suppression Envoy. Lord Blue is the Pass Suppression Envoy of the 10th city. Jian Wushuang nodded and replied, Let's go. Let's go and meet that Lord Blue. The 2 of them walked toward the fortress. Along the way, many people fixed their eyes on Jian Wushuang. This person, the Blood Sword? As expected, I knew that the Blood Sword would come to the 10th city and enter the last 8 cities. There are many good friends of Heavenly Snake Playboy in the last 8 cities. I'm afraid that trouble will come one after another when the Blood Sword enters the 8th city. I just don't know if he can pass Lord Blue's test. Jian Wushuang was expressionless, as if he had not heard the discussion. He walked closer to the huge fortress.